Spells and scattered showers breaking through. Further showers are expected Tuesday and Wednesday. Temperatures a little fresher than they have been of late.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 9th of July. Today, questions for the BBC. Who is the presenter at the centre of the latest sex scandal? And what have they done to investigate?
President Biden is visiting the UK today. He's going to hold meetings with Rishi Sunak and King Charles.
And the latest report shows it seems 65% of us are clueless when it comes to basic DIY.
And then, of course, we'll have the weather.
There we've seen plenty of heavy showers and thunderstorms this weekend so far. Will there be more today? We'll find out soon in the latest weather forecast.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
How did it go yesterday? Did you have a relaxing afternoon in the sun? Was it too hot? Did you get rained on?
I got rained on.
I'm thinking about the weather.
It was so humid yesterday because it was very cloudy, really, not very much sun, but unbelievably warm.
It's that sticky at night thing. It's just getting unpleasant.
And then I just went indoors and watched Wimbledon.
Oh, did you?
And fell asleep.
Oh. Oh, very nice.
Yeah, off and on. What about you?
Well, it's too sticky for me now. It's getting too sticky.
I thought you bought an air conditioner.
I have, but I haven't plugged that in yet.
Well, you're meant to.
No, but that's when it's really hot, because they're very expensive to run, aren't
But
they?
it is really hot
So
now.
I've just got little fans going at the minute.
That's daft to buy an air conditioner and not use it.
I'm just waiting for the right time. I was thinking it'd be a sticky day for a wedding. George Osborne got married yesterday. And they're...
Out of order.
There was
totally out of order here.
Well,
It doesn't matter what you think of him personally or his politics. I mean, he was a chancellor, but now he's a private individual and he's getting married. And it seems that somebody or people generally, what are you after?
a mirror.
Yeah.
I think a picture might be.
Oh, just after ruining his wedding, and I think. You know, it's not just about him, it's about the bride and all the family members and everybody going there. It's not fair. There was an absolutely evil email sent to nearly every guest.
Unless it's all true.
Yeah, well, even if it was true, it's still evil. It was, hateful.
I read the email last night. And it's shocking. It is absolutely shocking. And you can't help, whether you believe it or not, and let's, for the benefit of the doubt, say it's all absolute nonsense. You know, just to be on the safe side.
Nasty allegations about lots of people.
Yeah, then you would it would leave a sour taste in your mouth if you're one of those guests, never mind the bride and groom. But then there was this... Now, you see, I'm a bit torn about this, because we presume a Just Stop Oil protester. Because it's orange confetti.
It's somebody who looked like a completely harmless middle-aged woman sort of walked up to them and then threw orange confetti all over them. And all I can say is thank God it was confetti.
Yeah, but is that...
But how frightening must that have been?
Well,
particularly for the bride, but walking out of church should be a wonderful day of celebration, and then suddenly somebody comes up to you and does something you weren't expecting at all. It could have been anything going on. And I think that must have been terrifying on your wedding day.
But I sort of think with that, because, you know, we all get a bee in our bonnet about these protests, and I think a lot of it is justifiable. Some older lady throwing orange confetti at you, I sort of think that's a bit of a legitimate... I mean, I don't know why they've done it on their wedding day, but it's not a terrible thing, is it?
I think it must have been very frightening. I mean...
confetti.
Yeah, yes, but it could have been anything. It's somebody walking up at you, throwing something at you on your wedding day. I just think it's completely immoral, that is. It's not as if George Osborne is a serving politician. Now, I know he's done his bit, but aren't you entitled to a few moments of happiness on your wedding day? But no, somebody came up and decided... I mean, and all I'm saying is that could have been anything.
Well, they may have just thought it was, oh, there's the security getting in.
Well, that's the other question, is as a former Chancellor, he must have security still.
Well, as someone worth tens of millions of pounds, he could have had a bit of security there.
Well, yes. I'm sure, as a former Chancellor, he's probably entitled still to...
It's probably just one officer, though, I should think.
Well, one officer wasn't doing his job properly, was he?
No.
I feel cross about that. I just think... I don't care if you dislike the couple.
I sort of think, though,
they don't deserve that.
How are you meant to police it? Because if someone stood there with a box of confetti on your wedding day...
Well, they should ask, are you a guest?
Maybe she was, and maybe she just chose orange confetti.
Maybe.
Anyway, who knows?
I don't think it's fair to disrupt a wedding.
No. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts on that, gbviews@gbnews.com. You'll have some thoughts on this next one, though I've got to say we may well not be able to read them out because it's legally very difficult, actually, at the moment. But it's on so many of the front pages now about this BBC star who's... been accused of soliciting pictures from a teenager and then sending some pictures back.
Yeah,
so
apparently this BBC presenter, that's what we're told, presenter, is a household name.
They must earn a bit of money, because apparently they've paid £35,000 for these pictures.
For these pictures from... sort of soliciting these pictures from a teenager. Sending them a lot of money, and you have to earn big money to be able to just fork out 35 grand. And apparently this person is a household name. Nobody... When you work in television, you immediately get rung up by everyone you can think of, saying, you must know who it is. Who is it?
No.
We actually really do not know.
No.
But apparently that person has been taken off the air now.
But there's allegations...
But they weren't taken off the air soon enough.
No, there's allegations there, because this was reported back in May and they've only just been taken off the air when the story's broken. So what have the BBC done about it up until now? And, of course, there is a big question with this because people like Rylan Clark,
Jeremy
Vine,
Gary Lineker
have all come out and said, it's not us. Now, so if you work for the BBC, and you're a man earning a certain amount of money...
And you're a household name.
There's going to be a lot of pressure on you to say, well, it isn't me. And you shouldn't have to do that.
No, it shouldn't, because you're innocent until proven guilty, which is why you're usually not named in these circumstances. But not naming this person almost casts that horrible shadow over every other, well-known male presenter at the BBC. So I think it's not being handled well at all.
No, it's not. Let's get the latest from Stephanie Tetchy, who's actually in Rotterdam at the moment. I mean, Stephanie, this is a hugely difficult story in some respects, isn't it?
Yes, Stephen, it is a very difficult case to navigate, both for the BBC and both for the woman in question and her mother. Her mother's been left horrified about how the BBC has dealt with this situation, because she went to the BBC in May about the situation that her daughter had been solicited by this well-known presenter, and she was quite surprised that since May this unnamed presenter has still been on air. The BBC have come out with a statement and said that they have been investigating it, but it's all about gathering the right evidence. I know this woman, this mother in question, says that she's seen payments from this star, like 5,000 a pop, like detailing from about 3 years ago towards her daughter to send these pictures to the star. But the BBC still have a duty of care on both sides, both to the claimant and both to the presenter in question. But what's happened now is, now that there's this witch hunt from the public and both the industry to find out who this presenter is, they're going to now have to investigate this at full steam. And I think because it hasn't been public knowledge, I think the BBC, if I can say it, has been taking their time in investigating this situation, and they probably didn't think it would get as much attention as it has now.
I mean, it does raise the question, and it's a fair one. I mean, because you can say, well, it's all come to light now, and the BBC have taken this person off air. But the point is, if they knew these allegations were being made back in May, it's 2 months ago, the question is, shouldn't they have taken action immediately while it was investigated?
Totally, and it feels like history repeating itself. So we've seen so many scandals recently, whether it's the Philip Schofield, or if you even want to go much bigger than that, there's been so many names over the years where there's been investigations, and there's always been that key question of why haven't these matters been handled straight away and very swiftly? And this is where the BBC kind of have paint on their face at the moment, because those questions are going to be asked, and you're dealing with someone who was a teenager at the time, who has been exploited by one of their household name stars, and it's not going to be a situation that's going to be able to be swept underneath the carpet. And I think the BBC now will, be trying to put out all these statements to say they've had to do the right investigations, they've had to provide the evidence, because from what I've read in the statements, it seems like they've been lacking evidence from the claimant as well. So I think this is why the BBC have also been dragging their feet on this situation.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? As you say, to a certain extent, you have to give the BBC time to investigate it properly. But this was complained about in May, and it is such a serious thing. I mean, it could potentially even involve criminal proceedings, because if any of the allegations are true, I mean, it may be against the law, asking a youngster to send sexual images to him. It just seems to take such a long time. It's wrong to keep that person on the air, and apparently they did, until The Sun came out with this story just a couple of days ago.
And I think that's what the problem is, Anne, because what's going to happen eventually, the media already, know who this person is, not going to name him. But what's going to happen, a lot of people are going to keep on pressing for this presenter to be named. And the BBC face a big problem on their hands, because once that name is made publicly, it's definitely...
Oh, we've lost...
lost Stephanie. Yeah. We got all the points there, though. I mean, but it's... Oh, Stephanie's back. Stephanie, you were saying...
Hi there. The BBC do face a big problem on their hands because eventually the newspapers are not going to let it lie. They're going to keep on pressing until we can name this person. And once people do know this household name, it's going to be quite shocking, to be honest.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, yet again, what we've got after the Philip Schofield problem, we've got, again, the problem of how a TV company handles its big stars. Because once you create a big star and and they are regularly on air, you have a certain responsibility towards the public and particularly young people they're influencing.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, and that ITV had to go to Parliament to answer all these questions. And now it seems like the BBC would be trailing behind them, because I think for so long in the media industry, there's been this culture of protecting your household stars. But you can't be doing that when it's involved teenagers who are being exploited. And, you know, the public puts so much trust in the household names that we watch and that we love. And I think these bosses think there's been this culture of protection for too long, and I think that's all turning on its head now. And with these stories, it's only a matter of time before someone speaks out.
I mean, there is a problem with this, and it's where it gets complex, because, of course, we don't know. This person is innocent until proven guilty. You know, the allegations have been made, but we don't know that they have actually done anything wrong, which is why, you know, they're not being named at the moment. However, what it has done, it's left every other male BBC presenter who's
guilty
a household
until proven
name.
innocent.
Well, exactly. So they're having to come out and sort of defend themselves now, which seems very unfair.
Well, this is now where the story's getting seen, because, you know, all these different presenters, Gary Lineker, Ryan Clark, Nicky Campbell, he's even had to, you know, approach Twitter and report trolls because he says he has to take a stand, because it's quite damaging for these people as well to be their names to be thrown into the mix. And this is where the BBC now are going to have to take it to this next level and either represent this unnamed presenter and say this is actually the facts which is happening in this case, and, you know, it's none of the rest of our talent. So this is where the situation becomes a bit difficult. And we do talk about mental health, as we've seen with Philip Schofield. There's a lot of pressure. So whoever this presenter is who hasn't been named, they're probably quite scared right now for their career. And it's not long until people put two and two of who's missing off the BBC screens at the moment.
That's right, absolutely. I'm sure social media must be completely flooded with people's ideas and thoughts about who this person is.
But of course, again, but that highlights the problem, doesn't it? Because 99% of them will be wrong. The minute you see various names pop up, well, most of them, they can't all be right.
It's a very interesting conundrum for... Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, but I was just going to say, always in these cases, as with the Philip Schofield one, there's always a young person who's involved in this. I think there's always the sensationalism about who the presenter is. But, you know, from what I've read, this was a 17-year-old girl who has drug addictions, and this presenter was using this money to help support her habits if it is proven true. So I think this is where the BBC and the general public have to navigate it quite properly, because there is a young person involved, and if that person's named, it also affects her mental health, and her life will then change.
That's actually, it's a very good point, Steph, because we're talking about the star who may or may not have done something wrong here, but we haven't talked about the victim in this, which is a problem, actually.
And it's very interesting. This morning, Stephanie, I've noticed that The Sun, which knows the identity and it broke the story, and a lot of the other papers are being very careful not to actually say whether it's a girl or a boy who is the victim. They're using the victim, the youngster, the teenager, the child. And when they quote the mother saying how upset she is, she talks about, my child was doing this, my child was asked to do that. And I'm wondering if they're just trying to protect identity, maybe, by even now protecting whether it was a boy or a girl.
Well, they are trying to protect this person, but I think what happens, as we saw with the Philip Schofield situation, they didn't need to name the man in question. You just needed to go on Twitter and his picture was all flooded over people's timelines. So the media are doing the right thing in terms of reporting accurately. But I think when you come to the public now, as we've seen with these different BBC presenters who have been dragged into it, people will start talking, and even people close to the victim, if they're not careful, will start talking to the papers as well.
Yeah.
Stephen and I were talking a few minutes ago about the fact that if you work in television, people ring you up because they assume you must know. Well, you have better contacts than nearly anybody in the press as well as telly. Do you know who it is?
Yes, and I do know who it is. We got the story actually a few weeks ago, and we knew the name. We had been hearing rumours about this presenter, but again, you get a tip about these stories, and you're always sceptical about whether there's any truth to it, whether we can stand it up. So we did get a tip a few weeks in our newsroom, and just yesterday, my editor, told me who it was. And again, with the Philip Schofield thing, people were sitting on that story for so many years, and so I can imagine the Sun have been building up this story as well, and it just spreads like a wildfire. And it's if it is true and it is this person, I think it's definitely going to be a very big story that we'll be talking about for a while.
OK. Steph, for now, thanks very much indeed. Good to see you this morning. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
And that's a very interesting question to ask anyone at home. Do you think that person should be named? Because by inference, every other famous male presenter on the BBC at the moment is going to feel as though they're being pointed at.
This is where I'm very much because I can imagine, because it's human nature that we all want to know. And I can imagine you all going, yes, name them, name them. And it's not necessarily the wrong thing to do. My concern would be if this person is innocent, which is a possibility, if they're innocent and they're named, that will forever haunt them. They'll always be tainted, even if they've done nothing wrong here.
But it can't be that difficult to find the evidence.
It'll come out.
The complaint was first made 6 weeks ago. The mother is talking to the son.
Well, look, if
there were pictures, then they'll be there somewhere, won't they?
Well, look, the Sun says that this person sent a picture in their pants to this team. So presumably the Sun has seen that, and presumably the Sun has seen the evidence to say that these bank transfers were made.
Yeah.
So if there's evidence, it should be pretty strong.
Well, they must be trying to make that decision at the Sun, mustn't they? Do we name him? Do we feel we've got enough evidence now to name him? And at what point does a newspaper say, right, we'll hand our evidence over to the police? Then it becomes a police matter.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you think? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. If someone's falsely accused, then you've got to... We saw a lot of this, of course, with accusations following what on earth was it called, that investigation, or following all the Savile stuff, when loads of people were arrested. In fact, loads of people, quite a number of famous people went to court and were cleared of all these charges. But, of course, they get tainted then when they've been actually done nothing wrong. But in this case, it's difficult. No charges, it's all just waiting to see what will happen. Anyway, if you've got thoughts on that, so I'm not going to guarantee to you that we'll read them out. It depends. You need to keep them sensible. But gbviews@gbnews.com on that one.
Gosh, well, there's lots more to be talking about today as well. President Biden is coming to Britain. Do we still have a very important relationship with America? It seems that he didn't come to the coronation, but he is now coming to meet the King as well.
Yes, it's a bit of a strained relationship, isn't it? So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail coming up. First, though, here's your weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. We'll they'll turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that'll lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
It is 6:25. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your radio, your TV and online on a Sunday, 6:25 on a Sunday morning. Why do we do it, Anne?
I don't know. Are you watching out there? Maybe you're lying in bed with a nice cup of tea.
I hope so. Do you know what? It's weird doing a breakfast show. I've done it for past 20 years, near as damn it now.
40.
But, well, yes, I know. Well, you're always going to win on that front.
Yeah.
But isn't it a magical time of the day
Yeah,
to
it's
be
lovely,
working?
actually.
I mean,
it's brilliant. But that's why I think we love to hear from you, because you know, you're here in a sort of studio and you're surrounded by cameras and you're working, and it could frankly be any time of day. And hearing from you reminds us that actually, you know, the sun's coming up outside and what are you doing? And especially on a Sunday morning, you might not even be thinking of getting out of bed for a couple of hours.
Couple of thoughts on the wedding.
This is George Osborne's wedding.
Barry says the woman that tried to ruin Osborne's wedding wouldn't be happy if someone tried to ruin her daughter or granddaughter's wedding.
Yeah.
But then Chris says, why should Just Up Oil campaigners concentrate protests on the civilian populace who have no power to alter or influence climate policies?
Because they get talked about.
I don't know if...
They haven't claimed
George
responsibility, actually, for this, but it was orange confetti.
It was orange confetti, and they have tweeted something about nice confetti or something.
Yeah, I mean, David in Brighton says, I'm sorry, but I'm absolutely repulsed that this person went to someone's wedding and threw the orange confetti at the bride and groom. I think it's rotten, too. I just think it's a rotten thing
It is rotten for someone to ruin... Well, they haven't ruined the wedding.
No, they haven't, but they could have. I mean, as, you know, lots of people are saying it could have been anything she'd thrown. Luckily, she was a decent person who only threw paper confetti, but...
She was quite pleased with herself.
Yeah, she does. It's what she wanted to do, and she's done it. But I just think it must have been very frightening to have somebody come after you throwing something at you.
I'll tell you what I have noticed, though, over a couple of campaigns, the one at Wimbledon as well, because we've often talked about a lot of these campaigners being, frankly, stuck up, too rich, middle-class youths.
Yes, young people
with nothing better to do.
Idealistic young people.
Wimbledon was older people.
Yeah.
This lady was obviously an older lady. I don't know, the oldies getting involved now, and they should, frankly, they should know better.
Yes, but in their defence, they say that they've got children and grandchildren and they care about the world that they're inheriting. I mean, they've got an argument, it's just that that's not the way to argue it.
It's not the way to do it. No. Anyway, if you've got a thought on that, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, Rishi Sunak has got a very busy time at the moment. He paid a visit to Selby yesterday in support of the Conservatives candidate Claire Holmes in the local by-election there.
Yeah, the latest polling data, though, shows, well, guess what? Labour could potentially have a 12-point lead as hopes grow of a shock win.
Well, joining us now is Portia Berry-Kilby, political commentator from Young Voice UK. Very good morning to you. Why on earth would anyone want to be Prime Minister at the moment? Can you even answer that?
Well, no, I don't think I would want to be Prime Minister at the moment. And at least for Rishi Sunak, it's not looking terribly bright. He has 3 by-elections coming up and none look as great as they should be. So there is a lot on his plate because this will definitely be a good indicator of what is to come next year. And if things are unsuccessful, then he'll have lots of very angry and disgruntled backbenchers and even frontbenchers.
Yeah, he will. I mean, clearly, all parties... Well, it doesn't always apply with the Lib Dems and Labour if some of them have got a stronger hand in it, but certainly the government, the Conservatives and a key opposition party are throwing everything at these by-elections, aren't they?
They very much are, because at this point in the game, it is indicative of what is going to come in the future. And Rishi has laid out his five-point plan. Is that making cut through? Are voters happy with that? And we've seen since Boris Johnson, there's been 2 prime ministers. Is the fallout since Boris Johnson out of voters' minds? Has Rishi brought this kind of stable approach to politics, kind of the professionals getting on with the job? Or in people's minds, are the Conservatives still a failing party? Can they not forgive what the Conservatives did during lockdown and the breaking of the rules themselves? Is there any hope? And at the end of the day, it's been 13 years of Conservative rule. And has that translated into a positive feeling for voters? Do they feel better off than they were back in the 2010s? And it's looking unlikely. So unless that changes in the next 12 months, then things are just going to get even worse for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, it must be very difficult at the moment to be a Conservative candidate. They're going to have to do an awful lot of knocking on doors and, you know, the doorstep sort of thing, and kissing lots of babies and taking lots of selfies and all the rest of it. We've just seen some pictures there of Rishi doing exactly that. And actually, he's probably better at it than I was thinking. He looks as though he's actually enjoying campaigning.
He does look as though he's enjoying campaigning. And I think from what people say, Rishi Sunak is quite a personable chap. So that's always positive. But as you note, all of the candidates will be out campaigning. Anyone who's on the candidates list is meant to do 5 days of campaigning in advance of the by-elections, and MPs are expected to do about 3 days campaigning in advance of the by-elections. So it really is everyone giving it their all in the hope that that makes a difference. You just hope that the calibre of those candidates and the MPs actually go down well with people on the doorstep. and they've not made mistakes as to who they've selected, because that's also not going to help. And if it is needed to be a fresh face for the Conservative Party, and what do the Conservatives stand for, then hopefully they've made the right selections and people to send.
Yeah, but that's the issue, isn't it? Because it seems people are fed up and wanting a protest, you know, and it's going to be anyone but the Conservatives in some respects. I mean, they're talking about anything under 25,000 majority is actually now totally vulnerable.
Yeah, so the outlook is very much bleak. And what we've seen is that Labour, there was a story this morning, are basically going to match the Conservatives' commitments to spending and taxation. So they're not having to innovate with any new ideas. They could basically carbon copy the Conservatives' manifesto and say, but hey, we're not the Conservatives. And that's probably enough to win them the election, because it simply has to be a change. Anyone but the Tories is the general consensus, and it's not really even a matter of policy for Labour. They just don't have to do anything too wrong in order to succeed.
Are you and the other young voices that you speak to sort of resigned to the Conservatives losing the next election?
I think there is a fair amount of resignation about the way things are going to go. But at the same time, there is, potentially over a year in which things could turn around. And I think if the Conservatives do go back to a few more actually conservative principles, then maybe there is hope. But at the moment, there's not much legislation going through Parliament. They've kind of cleared the tables, A, because summer's coming up, B, because there are all of these by-elections. So there's not really much to show for the Conservative government. They can't say, yes, we did this, X, Y, and Z, passed all of this legislation. Look, we've delivered on the Conservative manifesto. They're kind of dragging their feet and looking at these key battlegrounds, which is all well and good, but that doesn't translate into telling voters on the doorsteps, this is what we've actually achieved with this huge majority and all of this time in government.
Yeah, no, fair point. Portia, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Resignation amongst some, perhaps. Joyous expectation amongst others.
Yeah, and sort of fed upness from a lot of people that there isn't anything better to look forward to.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? If one party matching the other one doesn't really give us a lot of choice, does it?
I come across a lot of people who are just saying, you may get rid of it, maybe it's time for the Tories to go, but then, are the other lot going to do any better? And then you think, well, better the devil you know, stick with the devil you know. But is that right? We shouldn't be like that. We should be voting for people that we really believe can change the country for the better.
Yeah.
We should be hopeful and optimistic.
Anyway, send us your thoughts on that. Meanwhile, it is very busy. So Rishi's up in Selby yesterday. Today, well, he's got a busy evening because President Biden is heading over to the country tonight. He's going to visit Rishi Sunak and King Charles on a pretty short trip ahead of the upcoming NATO summit.
Yes, now, the Prime Minister is going to hold a low-key meeting with him on Monday. That's tomorrow, isn't it? And then he's going to discuss climate issues with the King later. And that's interesting because he didn't come to the coronation, but he is going to see King Charles. Yeah,
well, let's talk to Professor Scott Lucas from the University College Dublin. Good to see you this morning. It's always interesting now with Biden coming over here because he has, rightly or wrongly, developed this relationship of being someone who's not overly pursued our very special relationship.
Well, I think the Biden administration as a whole has continued to keep up those key links that we've had since World War II. You could talk about the links between the military services, between the diplomatic services, between the economic communities, between the intelligence services. And those links indeed have been vital as part of the international support for Ukraine against Russia's invasion. I think what you're probably referring to is that not just Joe Biden, but also a cross-section of Washington, both Democrats and Republicans, were very unsettled by what has happened with Brexit, and in particular the threat to sabotage the Northern Ireland Protocol. And that meant that until that threat to Irish security was removed, not just Joe Biden, but all of Washington was going to stand back from London. Now, to Rishi Sunak's credit, he removed that threat at the start of this year by agreeing to keep the protocol and to work on developing it with the European Union. And it was at that point It was at that point that not just Joe Biden, but again, Republicans and Democrats could look at London as being a reliable partner on economic and political issues, as well as on the specific issue of Ukraine.
Well, that's right, Ukraine, because President Biden has now promised these cluster bombs to Ukraine to help Ukraine. But we in this country have already signed up to some sort of an agreement that we disapprove of the use of cluster bombs. Is that going to make things a bit difficult between President Biden and the Prime Minister this weekend?
No, I don't think so, Anne, and I think it's a really good question. The convention you referred to is in 2008, in which more than 130 countries said they would not use cluster munitions. The UK, Russia, US, Russia, and Ukraine have not signed up to that convention. I think what's important here is that whereas Russia has been using cluster munitions in Ukraine on civilians and on civilian sites, Ukraine, after weeks of discussions with the Americans, has committed itself to 5 principles. That includes not using cluster munitions on civilians, of course, that's a war crime, not using cluster munitions in urban areas, only using them on Russian military positions, not using them inside Russia, and I think most importantly, or equally important, to keep a careful report on where they use cluster munitions. So if they do not detonate, they can be part of demining efforts as soon as Ukrainian territory is liberated from the Russian invaders.
Yeah. Then we've got this meeting with the King at Windsor Castle. Would you clarify this for us? Because I know there's this whole thing in the UK about President Biden being invited to the coronation but snubbing the King. But isn't it protocol that you invite the President but he doesn't come?
That's absolutely right, Stephen. The reason why no US president has ever attended the coronation of a British monarch has to do with something called 1776 and the War for Independence, in which we wanted to, rightly or wrongly, wanted to get away from the rule of a British monarch. So that's why no president comes across. Joe Biden, the First Lady, did come across for the coronation. There were congratulations that were sent across from Washington, but no, it was just a matter of protocol. And there are certain mischievous folks in the media, not yourselves, who've tried to whip this up as a snub to the King.
That's fascinating. I did not know that at all. I wondered at the time why President Biden didn't come to the coronation. But of course, we haven't had to face that little problem for some 70 years before. That's absolutely amazing, and it just shows, as you said, that what you read in the press can sometimes be stirring things unnecessarily. Thank you so much. Great to see you this morning.
Yeah, that's
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
And it's understandable why it would be written, more or less, maybe not written down, but understood that an American president wouldn't want to welcome a king.
Yeah, so you invite them, but they decline. Send a representative.
Yeah.
But then, all the papers full of it. Snob.
And that's why Jill Biden came, because that was the best they could do in the circumstances.
It's interesting.
Nobody said that.
I said it.
Well, I'm right. I wasn't watching.
Just on days you weren't tuned in.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're allowed the odd day off, when you weren't working. That's fine. Look, we've got plenty more to come for you, including all the stories making the headlines in the papers. This is Breakfast on GB News. 6:42, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah, and you are watching, which is lovely. Yeah.
Yes.
We were saying earlier that we get up and we sit in a studio and we don't really know what you, even if the sun's come up outside, are you watching? And yes, you are. Nick says, yes, there are many of us watching, even at this ungodly hour. Keep up the fantastic work.
Linda says, I'm watching, as I do every morning.
And Gary in Cambodia says, morning to you, Stephen and Anne. It's already midday here. I do get up out of bed at around 5, though, every morning, one of the best times of the day.
It's a lovely time of the day, but sometimes you just need to...
You have a tough time convincing people that
Yeah.
actually early morning is brilliant.
James says, sitting watching your show and looking out at the sunrise.
Tom says, love to get up and turn on the telly to you two. Makes a good start to my day. Thank you.
And Sue in Lincolnshire says, I'm up every morning to watch GB News and I have a diabetic dog, so she needs early morning feeding and then injecting. I often think it must be very difficult with diabetic pets, because you don't monitor their glucose levels and things. You just have to,
I don't
know, hope for the best.
No. Didn't even know there was such thing as a diabetic dog.
It must be very difficult. Must be very difficult.
Oh, well. You learn all about life here, don't you?
Oh, you do? Well, that's the nice thing about it. Let's look at the Sunday Times, should we? It leads with the BBC crisis as a TV presenter is alleged to have paid a teen for sex photos.
In the Telegraph, however, George Osborne's big wedding day is making the front page picture because a protester ran up to him and his new bride as they came out of the church and threw orange confetti all over them.
The Sunday People says plain stupid Tories as the government spends $800,000 on painting a UK flag on Rishi Sunak's jet.
And finally, the Sunday Express. The banks have been accused of putting the nation's security at risk by refusing to do business with Britain's defence industry.
So it might cost that much.
We're learning more and more about what the banks just like to do because they can do it.
Yeah, well...
Aren't we?
No, it's a bit worrying. Let's talk to writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, who are both here this morning.
Morning.
Good to see you.
Morning.
Nice to see you. Emma, let's start with the BBC crisis. Look at the Sunday Mirror's take on this.
Yeah, well, it's a really unhappy story for everybody involved, isn't it? The Mirror's take is that this BBC presenter, who has still not been named, was partying with bosses even after the official complaint was made. So apparently on May the 19th, the mother of this young person had made an official complaint, and only a few weeks later, the presenter himself was, I have to be very careful about what I say, I suppose, was enjoying drinks and a 3-course meal with bosses and colleagues and elite celebrities at an exclusive venue. So clearly the official complaint hadn't been taken seriously enough for this person to be maybe put aside while it was investigated, or that the investigation wasn't really taken seriously enough. Sorry, it's very hard to know what to say.
It is.
It's all, one has to remember people are innocent until proven guilty, but it's just
What do you think of the
situation.
fact, though, that, yes, the person is innocent until proven guilty, but by the sheer fact that we know it is a household name, presenter of the BBC, that tars everybody there with the same brush?
Well, you've had this extraordinary, almost like reverse I am Spartacus thing going on at the BBC, where people have been coming out. You've had Gary Lineker, Nicky Campbell, Ryland, various other people, Jeremy Vine, having to say explicitly, it's not me, I'm not this person. So, yeah, it puts everyone in an incredibly difficult position. I do completely understand the wariness to name people or to, make these accusations public, because we have been here before. 10 years ago, after Savile, there was a kind of rush to root out anyone else we'd missed almost in the past, few decades. And lots of people who were innocent were dragged through the courts, not just named, not just had their reputations tarnished, they actually had to face trial and things like that. So I can understand the wariness on that side too, but...
So how do you handle it? Because obviously the BBC is going to come in for a lot of criticism in the way they've handled this, but it's very difficult to see how else they could have.
Well, yes, but
could they have looked at the evidence like the Sun has?
but the policeman Mark Williams-Thomas is in the Mirror, who had revealed the Jimmy Savile situation. He is saying in the Mirror, this man should have been suspended pending investigation, and I think that's the basic. Of course, people are innocent until proven guilty, but at least the complaint should have been taken more seriously than this. And yet this person was out and able to mingle with colleagues and you know,
Well, stay on air.
stay on air and actually be out at celebrities and drinking. And
But, you know, even that's difficult, isn't it? Because if you were a household name, always on
you're suddenly
the telly,
pulled off.
and suddenly you're pulled off, that's going... Yeah, you're almost being declared guilty and having to prove your innocence.
Well, that's the thing, and if the BBC, you know, no one has been suspended yet, but if someone was suspended, then we'd know exactly
Well,
who
but we are
it
told
is.
this person has been suspended.
Oh, OK, sorry.
But only just very recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the
papers
detail is...
Only when the
overnight,
Sun...
they were saying...
Only when the Sun, you know, rang the BBC and said, we know about this.
Yeah.
Did they then suspend him?
Yeah, but the details that are coming out about sort of, you know, £5,000 lump sums of cash being sent over, whoever this is, you know, we are in a situation now where there's no question that they were friends or that they were sort of having a relationship. You know, we all know now this is wrong. This is an era in which people are highly aware that this kind of thing, explicit photos being sent online, this kind of thing is absolutely, if not an abuse of power, you know, criminal.
Yeah.
So it sort of beggars belief that anybody could have gone into this and carried on doing this in recent years. I think it dates from 2020. It'll come out. It really will. It'll come out. It'll be in the next few days. I mean,
Yes,
there's been names
the
swirling
pressure is
around
on right
all
now.
night.
Yeah.
Of course, there have.
Graham's been in touch. Hi, Graham. Says, I agree with Stephen. It's very frustrating because we all want to know who it is, but it has to be done correctly.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
It's a very,
I
very
think the other thing is don't believe everything you read on social media at the moment. Because
Yeah.
if people on social media are naming the name, then there's an awful high chance that they are probably really wrong and defaming somebody.
And
Yeah.
poor Nikki Campbell has been wrongly, you know,
Trolled,
accused
isn't he?
and
Yeah.
trolled over this. So, yeah, do not believe what you read on Twitter, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then again, it's a large group of people all sharing what they're hearing, and it's sort
Yeah.
of like a public marketplace. I mean, yeah, I'm very, very disenchanted with Twitter at the moment as well. But I think, you know, it's a lot of people saying, well, this is what I've heard, this is what I've heard, and eventually one of those names will float to the top.
Well, it will. And as you say, it's going to be very soon, isn't it? Because you
Well.
can feel the pressure on.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the Mail on Sunday, Fraser, should we? Where they say, not even weddings are sacred for Just Stop Oil.
I mean, this is a pretty extraordinary story. Just Stop Oil have done the impossible, and they're making people feel sorry for George Osborne. You know, one of the most disliked people in politics, but they've disrupted It's not actually necessarily clear that this was a Just Stop Oil plug.
No, they haven't
They haven't
claimed
officially claimed.
responsibility.
But the orange thing was...
The orange is obviously related
Just a bit
to
of
Just Stop
confetti.
Oil.
It was just a bit of confetti.
The Just Stop Oil tweeted it, saying, you know, talking about... They tweeted the video of it.
Here we're seeing pictures of George Osborne and his new bride, and then this sort of middle-aged-ish looking woman rushes up and throws confetti on them, but it happens to be orange. She walks off looking rather pleased with herself. And a security man who didn't step in soon enough, frankly, sort of told her to go. I just think it's a terrible shame. And you say it's just confetti, but it could have been anything.
No, I know. No, I was being silly. It's charming. I like seeing middle-aged people getting married again. I think it gives everybody hope. I like this wedding.
Fantastic.
It's sweet.
Do you?
I do. I think
It's a controversial wedding, of course, for all other reasons.
Yeah.
You know, this email doing the rounds.
Yeah,
was sent to all the guests.
exactly. It clearly hasn't been an easy few weeks for them. No, I like the idea that, you know, life isn't over at the age of 40 and that they've found new love again and
Absolutely.
all of that. I think it's nice.
Excuse me.
Oh,
And I'm not a George Osborne fan at all, but it sort of slightly warmed my heart that lovely Theo Rogers could marry her former boss, George Osborne.
Oh, can I ask you? was it last weekend? There was a Virginia Woolf there's a trigger warning put in one of the books. I said, we need to talk to Emma Woolf about this one. I can't remember what relation you are now.
She's my father's aunt, so she's my great aunt.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you make of these trigger warnings? I can't think what it was about.
I can't remember which book.
But there was a
It's
trigger
on all her
warning.
books.
Is it on
They
all
said
her
on
books?
pretty much all of them.
Because she's a person of, I don't know...
Of history.
Yeah, that's right.
Because she was writing in the early 1900s, the early 20th
person of
century.
interest.
So what do you think? There should be trigger warnings in these things?
No, I can't bear it. I can't bear this rewriting of Roald Dahl and this rewriting of Ian Fleming and all of that. It's absolutely ludicrous. And I think we're really losing, history and culture and our literature. We're denuding it, we're stripping it. If we make everything conform to these kind of 2023 standards, where anything offensive makes you rush off and hide under the desk and find a safe space and have a comfort animal or whatever.
I mean, I totally agree with you about rewriting. I think that's completely wrong. But what's wrong with a little trigger warning somewhere saying this was written at a different time, and you know, if you're offended by some of the attitudes, you know, just remember the context in which this was written.
I think you're right. I wouldn't call it a trigger warning, because that to me is triggering. It's just very, very irritating. But I think there's nothing wrong, and publishers have always done this, with having disclaimers, if you want to, in the front of a book saying, you know, be aware. I was rereading Neville Shute, who's another wonderful writer, but he does include some quite racist, quite very, very sexist, but very racist stuff. And it's uncomfortable when you read that. And same with Virginia Woolf. There are She talked about my great uncle as I'm to marry a penniless Jew. Well, we wouldn't say that nowadays, and it's quite offensive to sort of the Woolf side of the family, a penniless Jew. But it was in the context. It was a sort of loving little joke, and so it's easy to. I think it's easy to retrospectively go back and start accusing people.
Find offence where there wasn't any.
Find offence where really it wasn't intended, or whether that was just part of the culture at the time.
She would, however, still be pleased to know that she was making you feel uncomfortable just reading it.
Absolutely, and still
that's what she was all about.
Yeah.
And also, look at Orlando. It's about cross-dressing, it's about transgender, it's about people going from being male to female. I think, let's have a campaign to forget all this nonsense about the BBC. Let's have a campaign for everybody to reread Orlando. And
I've never read it.
Well, there you go. This is a woman who becomes a man over the centuries. It's incredibly gender fluid, incredibly trendy in kind of today's terms. It was the last Virginia Woolf I'd never read, and I read it last year. I was like, wow, she's a completely different writer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And, of course, that amazing movie that was recently made, Orlando, by the woman who made the piano.
Oh.
Jane Campion.
Jane Campion. Yeah, I've probably got that wrong. Somebody Potter made Sally somebody. I know.
After watching The Piano, I don't think
there's a new film of
made by the same person, actually, but there you go.
Well, there you go. Fascinating. Fraser, let's have a look at woke banks in the Sunday Express.
So this is an interesting story. There are these rules called environmental, social and governance rules. And they're kind of a voluntary thing, but lots of banks sign up to them, lots of companies want to be seen to have these high environmental or social scores. So they're basically getting more and more involved in politics, in a sense. They want to, you know, companies are not saying, look, here my product is excellent, I'm going to make a good profit. They're saying, we're doing all this stuff for the environment, we're doing all this stuff for social stuff.
We have a rainbow flag.
We have a rainbow flag, we are pro-diversity,
pronouns.
Things like that. And so it's an interesting, it's an interesting kind of melding of sort of politics and business. And now this is starting to hit defence companies. Now, you and I might have a view on what we think about people who make weapons, whether we have a moral view on that. In some contexts, it's obviously bad if we don't want, you know, weapons being shipped off to nasty regimes. But in a context like the war in Ukraine, clearly they're very necessary. Yeah. Or if we're talking about defending ourselves, potentially, from a threat. So it's slightly worrying that you have banks weighing in on whether this is moral or not.
Is it their job to weigh in on a moral decision?
That's the thing. You know, we can all take our own view on what's moral and immoral, what businesses we like and don't like. But when you have banks and people with financial power making those decisions on our behalf, seemingly, that's when we should be worried. That seems like an abuse of power to me.
Well, it's a very interesting one. Banks are coming under the spotlight a lot at the minute, and rightly so, I think. Look, sadly, we've got to leave it there. Emma Woolf, Fraser Myers, thank you both. We'll see you a little bit later on. This is Breakfast on GB News. Let's get a check on your weather forecast for today.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They will turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that will lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 9th of July. Today, another crisis at the BBC. An unnamed star is at the centre of a sex scandal. So what next for the state broadcaster?
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has paid a visit to Selby. That was yesterday in support of his own candidate, Claire Holmes. Are they on track to win over people on the doorstep?
A new report has revealed the housing market in the UK has suffered the biggest hit of any large European economy. Why is that? We'll talk to an expert shortly.
And a latest report shows that it seems a whopping 65% of you are now clueless when it comes to basic home DIY.
You say you because you're all right at DIY, aren't you?
Big on DIY, yeah, although it gets me down.
Oh.
Because it gets harder and harder, you know.
It does, I'm hopeless.
Yeah,
hate it.
no, I'll put up a shelf, and I wired the house up once for before the days of Wi-Fi. You know, I put those long cables. What do you used to call them? Ethernet cables.
Yes.
All over the house. I was up in the loft, going through the wall, putting things down the outside, into the study, everything like that. So I don't mind doing a bit of DIY. Although I have to say, by my age now, I'm a bit fed up having to.
Yes, don't bother. Get a man in.
Yeah, but you know,
You don't want to be doing it today because it might be nice weather.
There we've seen Plenty of heavy showers and thunderstorms this weekend so far. Will there be more today? We'll find out soon in the latest weather forecast.
Oh, maybe not nice weather, according to Greg.
DIY time.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I'm Stephen Dixon. Good morning.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Tell you what, that goes to show I need to pay more attention to Greg's weather forecast.
Yes, but you should actually listen to it. I always want to know. So here we are, 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. What are you up to? Well, you're watching us, thankfully, which is very nice, thank you. Guy says, just a thank you to you, Anne and Stephen, and indeed the whole team, of course, for living with your sleep deprivation, which results in you being able to deliver the breakfast show, and your Trick Award, of course, recognising that. You always bring a smile to this household, and your common sense views maintain my sanity.
Yeah, we're doing very common sense, I think. Pauline's watching with Annie, who's the dog, whilst my husband is asleep. Enjoying your common sense commentary.
Oh, that's lovely.
Oh, there you go. We are being very sensible today.
I love this from Kathleen. Morning, Kathleen. She says, I always watch you in bed with a cuppa. My husband and our dog are asleep, but they do wake up at about 7 to watch. One in bed with us and the other in his bed on the floor. He's too old to make it onto the bed. The dog, that is, not the husband.
I did wonder. Angie's got a good day ahead. She said, I'm up getting ready while my partner Tim is still asleep. We're going on the Flying Scotsman from York to Carlisle and back today, with full breakfast on the way up and silver service dinner on the return journey.
That sounds brilliant.
Oh, Angie.
That's a way to spend a Sunday.
That sounds wonderful.
Val says, I was looking forward to a lie-in today after spending a very long but beautiful day at Hampton Court Gardens show. Only, I'm afraid, to be woken by an air ambulance landing at the park just outside my front door at 5:30 this morning. I'm wishing whoever it is well.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Marilyn says, good morning from Lot-et-Garonne in France. Oh. Love the show.
Yeah.
Don't know where that is, but it sounds...
Lot-et-Garonne sounds
very nice.
Very lovely.
Sounds like there should be a chateau there.
Yeah, Lot-et-Garonne. Never heard of it. We'll have to look it up. Sounds lovely. Barbara says, morning, I'm sitting on my sofa with a cuppa before I start my chores.
That's
a Sunday for you, isn't it?
I did the chores last night.
Yeah.
In me little pinny.
Really?
Yeah,
do you wear a little pinny?
Well, I'd been doing some, to be fair...
That's a picture we need to see.
I'd been doing some cooking and did have... which involved beetroot, which is why I put a
yeah, full works, gosh. What were you making?
Beetroot burgers.
Oh, they're very good in burgers, apparently.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, you wouldn't...
It's very good for making veggie burgers.
You wouldn't think, but actually they're really tasty.
Whose recipe was that?
Slimming World.
Oh,
I'm back on Slimming World.
Oh, well done.
So, there you go. But very nice, actually.
Keep going.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, from all those lovely, nice things to a serious situation around the BBC. They've been rocked over allegations that a household name, a TV presenter, sent and received sex pictures with a teenager.
Yeah, and this BBC star also allegedly partied with BBC bosses after the complaint had been made.
Let's talk to Stephanie Tecci, who's in Rotterdam, actually, for us this weekend. Stephanie, I mean, this is a very serious matter, not only the allegations that have been made, but also trying to see how the BBC have dealt with this.
Yeah, I think it's quite serious for the BBC because, you know, the BBC is a public-funded state broadcaster. So, you know, over the past few years, the BBC have had a lot of controversy. People just thinking, what's the point of the licence fee? And now that they have this situation where they maybe potentially protected and fostered this environment where they haven't looked into this allegation swiftly, it's going to be raising a lot of questions why the BBC haven't handled this situation with a duty of care. This is not the first time a media organisation has been rocked by a scandal by one of their talents. And in these kind of situations and this kind of day and age, there really should be processes there where these things can be handled quite effectively. The BBC have said that they are dealing with this allegation quite seriously. And I think what's maybe delay here is this the evidence and the information they need to kind of, on both parties, from the claimant, the victim themselves, and also the presenter.
Yeah, I mean, Obviously, we're not being told who the presenter is, because clearly we always have to presume innocence until found guilty. But the problem with not knowing who it is and just being told that it is a major BBC male presenter, a household name, it tars other male presenters on the BBC with that sort of brush, doesn't it? People are going to assume whatever name they can think of. So they deserve some protection as well. It's actually quite a difficult one for the BBC to handle.
It is. Like, someone like Nicky Campbell last night was forced to go to Twitter and report trolls because his name was coming up saying that he was the unnamed presenter. And he said, I have to take a stand against this because why is my name being dragged into a situation which doesn't involve me? I'm not the man in question. And it is a bit like the game of Pluto at the moment, where people are trying to figure out who done it, and it's not fair on BBC, other BBC talent and BBC stars. But the thing with this happening now is going to force the BBC to take action, because this is not a story that's not going to go away over the next few days. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do eventually find out who this presenter is and being named publicly. But with these situations, you have to tread carefully. I think, while most people want this presenter to be named, this is very career-ending allegations, and as him being a household name, it's going to be a very big scandal.
There are very real questions, though, as to why, if these accusations were made, these allegations were made to the BBC on May the 19th, why it would appear that they may well have looked into it. They may have perhaps come to some conclusions. We don't know, but it would seem that no action was taken with this particular star up until it hit the newspapers.
I think always, and this is where I think a lot of media organisations get it wrong, and similar with the Philip Schofield story, the newspapers have been sitting on the story for a good couple of years, and I think most organisations tend to think that the story will go away, but me working in newspapers, I know that they don't let stories like this lie, and once it hits the front pages, that's where I think most organisations then try to do something about it. But what's been quite shocking is that the mother of the unnamed teenager, she complained to the BBC on May 19th about it. She says that the star has been funding her child's drug habit. So that is quite a very damaging allegation there. And that's not something they should have swept underneath the carpet. But as in all these kind of situations, there are two sides to a story. And as with ITV recently having to explain how they did handle that situation, I think the BBC now are going to have to be quite vocal about what process they've had in this situation. And as we said during this show, it's innocent till proven guilty. So we can't also assume that this unnamed presenter is guilty of this.
Yeah, but the BBC management, having watched what happened at ITV and all of the criticism that management came in for, they have to remember that they have a duty of care, not only to this BBC presenter who's being unnamed, all the other BBC male presenters who feel that they're being, pointed at and suspected, and also the teenager. How you balance all those three different duties of care must be an absolute nightmare for them, but we expect it of management nowadays, don't we?
We do, and I think the BBC really, they're held in such high regard, but also they've had so much controversy over the past few years that with a situation like this, they should have acted fast. And now they're going to have to address many questions. And to be honest, I think this story is going to get a bit more scandalous because, there are talks of there potentially being pictures and videos of this presenter sitting in his pants, which he sent to this teenager. So it's only a matter of the right paycheck from a newspaper that this picture might actually be made public. So this is definitely an ongoing story, and there's much more to come. So I think for BBC bosses right now, it's a lot of stuff that they need to cover up, and hopefully, I would like to think that this is a story that is not true, but unfortunately, I think it is.
OK. Stephanie, thanks very much indeed. Obviously, we'll be across it as best we can, but it's a lot of it is down to whether the BBC names this person or whether they come out or whether the papers do it.
Well, Stephanie told us a while ago that she knows who it is, but clearly at the moment nobody dare utter the name until everybody's sure enough, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
until
yes.
the lawyers have been all over it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about the evidence, isn't it? And you've got to be very careful not to judge people without the evidence.
Stephanie said that if there is a picture to be had, then people like the Sun newspaper or the Mail or somebody is going to write a big fat cheque for it, aren't they?
Yeah. Well,
At what point then do the police get involved? Because potentially there is a crime here as well. It's awful, isn't it? Anyway, let us know what you think. Should we be naming and shaming right now, or do you understand that there are dangers in doing so? GBviews at gbnews.com.
Now, a new report has revealed the housing market has suffered the biggest hit of any large European economy.
The persistent inflation and rising mortgage rates are the main reasons behind the 3.1% fall in house prices in the first 3 months of this year.
Let's talk to independent estate agent Jeremy Leaf. Good morning to you, Jeremy. As always, good to see you.
Lovely.
Is this a bad thing or not? Because we constantly we sort of frame it in a negative way, don't we? Well, there's been a drop compared to other nations. But actually, then, at other times, we talk about the housing market overheating. So, how does
it's a very good question, because what can happen is, even if prices fall, and other people might be thinking, or maybe a first-time buyer might be rubbing their hands with glee and thinking, oh, I can get on the housing ladder now, or more easily. But actually, in reality, falling prices tend to put lenders off as well. And
so although the price looks lower, you might have more difficulty getting a mortgage.
You might have more difficulty getting a mortgage. You might feel a little bit more unstable in your employment. You might think, oh, my goodness, prices are going to keep going down and down and down. Should I buy now or wait a little bit longer till they're lower? Your employment might be a little bit uncertain, so you're worried about taking on debt. So I don't think coming off a little bit is such a bad thing. It's just the momentum of transactions and getting people to actually move, which is the issue. It's not just a question of price.
That makes life really difficult, doesn't it? Because the next question to you is, well, when is a good time?
Yeah. Well, who knows? But what's actually happening on the ground in our offices are that people are negotiating very hard. A lot of people made money, or on paper anyway, from the stamp duty holiday after the pandemic. So they're sitting on paper gains. So the sensible ones are actually saying, well, yes, I did make quite a bit of money on paper. I want to get on with my life. The house is not in the right location. It's too big or too small for me. I'm not going to get that headline price, but let's move.
How much of it is driven by landlords? Because I know there is a lot of landlords. You assume landlords have got loads of money. Clearly, a lot of them haven't, and they're finding that their rent isn't, with the increased mortgages, the rent isn't covering the mortgage, and they're selling up as a result. Is that a big issue?
It is, and it's actually a very key point for the housing industry and part of the so-called housing crisis, because a lot of people who are renting have seen those rents shoot through the roof, and they're now paying maybe more on rent than they would on a mortgage. They're a little bit nervous, as Anne said, about prices, but they'd rather pay their mortgage than someone else's mortgage.
Absolutely.
And they'd rather get on the ladder if they can. And if those people are able to get onto the ladder and buy, that's releasing more properties and therefore keeping rents in check, which is what we basically want. Responsible people in property want to see transactions. They want to see people moving who want to move.
But the painful thing about the housing market, when you're actually in it, is that you've got to try and marry up the selling of your house with the buying of another one that you want, which is really difficult, as we all know.
Yeah.
Is it ever a good idea to sell when you think the price is good and you can get good price, to sell it and put that money in the bank or whatever and then maybe rent for 6 months until you feel that the market has come down enough for you to get a bargain?
More people are doing that and have been doing that over the last few years, certainly. But it's all about where you see house prices going. And I think if people are buying houses, they regard them, rather than flats, they regard them as more longer-term investments. So they're not necessarily looking, say, oh, I've saved £5,000 here or £3,000. Of course, it's still a lot of money. They'd rather get on with their lives. But people, if they're worried about prices falling, they are doing that. But of course, if you go in and rent a property, the rental market in lots of areas has gone bonkers. You know, there's nothing around. Rents are going crazy. It's not everywhere.
And you probably wouldn't get a short let, would you?
No, you can't legally. It's
all changed.
It's all changed. It's usually minimum of 6 months. There are short-term lets available
6
sometimes.
months would give you a feel for where the market is going.
I think so. There's no substitute from really doing your research on the ground.
I was going to say, there's no substitute for having lots of money.
Well, that does help. Of course, Anne, that does help.
I've got to ask, Jeremy.
Sure.
What's happened?
Oh,
for those on the radio, you've got a big plaster on your nose.
Occupational hazard. Spend a lot of time on building sites, and that's what
fall
happens.
on you?
No, nothing major.
You walked into a door.
Not quite as bad as that, but it's an occupational hazard. I spend a lot of time on building sites. I'd like to spend more time on building sites because I'd like to see more new homes built.
What is happening with new homes being built? And interestingly, yesterday we were talking about, or might have been Friday, but about why is there no requirement for these new houses to be built to be more eco-friendly, to have grey water systems, to have solar panels, and all that sort of thing.
They are.
But it's not legislated for, is it?
It just builders build what buyers want.
Have you seen some of these houses then that have got all those things?
I'm spending a lot of my time on building sites, and some of them are fantastic. But the other point is, which is quite interesting, is that the public don't yet, maybe unfortunately, dare I say it, utility bills have got to go up a little bit even higher to get that message across. But the public, the buying public, are not as wedded to the idea of we must have eco-friendly, we must have air source heat pumps. You know, who's going to maintain them? How much are they going to cost to install? Are they going to make a difference to our houses? Even solar panels, you know, which we've been very familiar with over the last few years. There's still quite a lot of buyer resistance.
Oh, that's interesting.
Why would there be? I don't understand.
Because we were reporting the other day that actually it seems like house prices are going... a more eco-friendly home are costing more money to buy.
They're costing more money to build as well. But I think a lot of it depends, again, on common sense and doing your research. Look at a house with panels, look at one without, look at the bills, say, can I see your bills? Obviously, they might have very expensive computer or electronic equipment which is shoving up the cost of the bill. But look at the difference, and am I actually saving money for that? Who's maintaining it? If it's not functioning correctly, can I get someone to come back and reinstall it or change it? Those are the practical questions. I mean, the first aspiration is great. Let's save some money.
Yeah.
You've got to stay. You've got to stay in it for a long time in order for you to see.
I think that's fair comment.
Any payback.
Jeremy, as always, good to see you.
Housing market, as ever, is always fascinating, isn't it?
I tell you what, I can understand those people who say, well, let's sell up, become a cash buyer, sit on the money for 6 months. I couldn't do that. I could not do it. I'm a nester. And
you have to immediately move to another nest.
Well, it's not that, but I couldn't spend 6 months floating.
I spent a year floating as well.
Oh, no.
It was fantastic. I liked it. Seeing all that money in the bank, it was terrific.
There's a couple I know, very well-known couple, actually. Well, he is. Very famous. And they move house every sort of 3 or 4 years. They just get bored. They're right, we're selling up. The house is on the market.
No.
Where are you moving to? Don't know.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do it for
know.
the sake of it.
Just bought a lovely house. They just sent me a picture of their new place. Gorgeous.
But it's one of the most traumatic things you can
But they
go
love
through.
it. They love it. I couldn't do that in a million years. And they said, how long have you lived in yours? And I was like, 12 years. And they're like...
Time to move now.
And they're in their 70s.
Yeah.
And they just love it. They just love moving.
No, I don't understand that. It's so traumatic.
Oh, I hate it.
And it's very expensive.
Sorry, Jeremy, I hate it. Sorry, but...
No, it's very expensive.
I like people moving frequently. That's good for me.
It's good for you. And the removal company I used time and again. And they said, Mrs. Dunn, you do realise we have moved these same boxes about 4 times for you, and you've very clearly never ever gone in them. They were just put in the lock.
Really?
Yeah. He said, it really is silly. He gave me a little lecture about it. He said, You've moved these boxes time and again, and I know you're not opening them and looking for... Do you even know what's in them? I said, no, but it could be very important.
Just chuck them out.
At the moment, yeah.
Have a clear out.
Yeah.
We like an occasional clear out.
Oh, clear out is brilliant. I think I need somebody else to do it. You can get people who do that, decluttering.
Can you?
I think I need a declutterer.
See, that is a good thing about moving. When you do move, you do end up throwing masses of stuff away.
Not me. I take it with me to the next house.
Honestly.
It's a tyranny.
If you've got any moving horror stories or dream stories, you never know. GBviews at gbnews.com. Love to hear from you this morning. We've got plenty more to come, including George Osborne. Now, may not be a popular man in some respects. There's quite a lot of sympathy for him at the moment because his wedding was disrupted yesterday by a protester. Not horrifically, I don't think, but...
I think frighteningly.
Wow.
I think it was intimidating. It's probably just up oil because it was orange confetti that was thrown over them. We'll tell you all about it after this.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They'll turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that'll lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome back, and a very good morning to you if you're just getting up.
Yes. Clive's a busy bee. Morning, Clive. Watching as always, but just off for a swim. Keep up the good work. A Sunday morning swim.
Well, it depends where you are. Where do you live, Clive? Have you got your own pool?
Oh, might be swimming in the sea.
Liz, we were talking earlier about somebody who has to get up early to look after their diabetic dog.
Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, and Liz now says, I'm up early every morning because we have an epileptic dog who needs medicating regularly. And then I'm popping out to our local boot sale, but I always check the news with you guys over coffee every morning.
Ah, now, car boot.
Yeah.
Never done a car boot.
Oh, car booting is wonderful.
So I quite fancy a car boot.
Yeah. Yeah, my family love car boot sales. You always come... I mean, you're meant to take a load of stuff to sell.
Do you have to do that, or can you just turn up?
No, you can just turn up as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But, I mean, the idea is that you sell off some of your junk from the loft, you know. But
Oh, you could have a field day.
I could, but I'd have to go up to the loft and get the boxes down and actually go... And then when you go through it, you think, oh, I can't get rid of that. But anyway, if you can,
brutal.
get along to a car boot. But you have to be very careful not to come back with more than you went with.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. I got told... My mother had a clear-out the other month, and I went up to visit, and she was having... She said, I need to have a clear-out. I need to get rid of these hens, and there's just pot hens and things. So I said, all right, off we go. And so I got them all packed up for her, and then we took them to the charity shop, and then she's blamed me for forcing her to get rid of her stuff. Ah. But it was her idea.
Yeah, no, that's not fair.
And to be fair, I did then come home and do it to all my stuff.
People always go to car boot sales, you know, just in case you find, a Rembrandt.
Oh, yeah. Well, there could be a TV show in there somewhere.
That's right, yeah.
Mind you, if you watch those TV shows, Car Boot Challenge or whatever they're called, you know, they always... I mean, they say, you have made a profit of £5.42 or whatever.
Yeah, but you spent 3 days doing it. No, exactly.
Barry's watching you while having breakfast. Then he's going to wash and hoover the car. A typical Sunday morning.
That's right. That is a proper British Sunday morning. Karen and Martin say we're watching from our bed in Bracknell. And we're off to Southend today for an Alapaha Blue Blood Bulldog meet-up. I hope I said that right. Alapaha. Blue Blood Bulldog meat.
Yeah, never heard of those.
No, me
Sounds nice. Interesting on the whole politics stuff, because I love the fact that we get a mix. Rory says, I've always been a Tory supporter, but in the Thatcher mould, this party has morphed into a Eurocentric party over the years. Billy says, as a former Labour Party voter many times, I will not be voting for the current setup.
And Jean says, and this comes up time and again, I would like to point out Rishi Sunak did not have the big majority. It's Boris Johnson's majority. Interesting.
Well, yeah, he's inherited it.
Yeah, but that's just it. He didn't get it.
No, he didn't win it on his own right.
And George Osborne's wedding's got you going as well. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
George Osborne, former Chancellor, got married yesterday to his former head of...
Something or other.
Yeah, she worked for him, basically, anyway. And they got married. She looked absolutely fabulous in her beautiful dress. And it should have been... it was a very happy day, I think, down in Bruton in Somerset. And as they came out of the church, she looking absolutely gorgeous. I have to say, that is one of the most stunning dresses I've seen in a long time. Very simple headdress as well, just with a long train. George looking very, very thrilled.
There's a lady throwing confetti.
It's a lady throwing orange confetti, and a lady who wasn't invited. And the security man steps forward and says, enough, but she walks away looking very pleased with herself. She had made her protest. One can only assume it is a Just Stop Oil thing, because it was orange confetti.
Helen says that woman, and that's how I will refer to her, should be made to apologise for her disgusting behaviour.
Rachel says, I think this confetti incident is quite sweet. There was no malice, and she didn't spoil it at all. I disagree with that, but I don't know what you think. Of course, there was no harm done, but you just can't help thinking there could have been. And why disrupt and spoil somebody's wedding day? That's all the guests at the reception would have been talking about.
Well, one of a couple of things, maybe.
Well, yes. On that, let's talk about this whole incident with the writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, who joins us now. Hi there, Candice.
Morning.
Morning. Happy Sunday to you. What do you think? What's your gut reaction to what happened to George Osborne and his new bride yesterday?
Oh, my gut reaction was the same as yours. I really disagreed with it. I just think that there are certain boundaries, and one of them is someone's wedding. You don't disrupt that. But I think Just Stop Oil don't cleave to those sorts of social norms. They do what they want to do when they want to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been criticised so much. I mean, if social media is anything to go by, across the political spectrum last night, people said, no, you don't disrupt someone's wedding. That's wrong. It doesn't matter what your political point is. But then when they were throwing paint at Van Gogh paintings, they didn't care then. And they said, you know, well, the climate emergency justifies it. But this is just such attention seeking. And I think what it's doing, though, is it's turning people off their cause, and it's making them really disagree with the tactics that they're using to try to get their point across. I mean, even their billionaire backers have said that they don't agree with it anymore. The whole thing's just gotten out of control.
Yeah, but look, I think the vast majority of people would agree and say, no, you shouldn't disrupt anyone's wedding. She didn't disrupt their wedding, did she? As they came out the church door, she walked up behind them and threw some confetti over them. It's not... I mean, they weren't disrupted. The whole thing lasted a couple of seconds and they smiled and carried on.
Well, I think that was more a smile of confusion. I mean, that's what I saw. They looked confused. I mean, Thea, she looked behind twice. What are you doing? I mean, that's supposed to be the moment for the bride and groom when they walk out of the church together to all their guests, and instead they had a stranger who they don't know just run up and start emptying confetti on them. And I thought that when she emptied the confetti at the last, before she was told to go away, that looked quite aggressive to me. I mean, she's not a friend of theirs.
No, that's what I think. You're a bride and you're coming out of the church, and it should be, you know, probably one of the happiest days of your life. And you don't know what's going to happen next when somebody comes up with a box of confetti.
No, and they're both quite well known as well. So, I mean, you have no idea if it's someone who is trying to be malicious towards you. Then they had that whole incident with the poison pen email. So, I mean, they might already be feeling a bit tense. I just, you know, I think that Just Stop Oil is creating a very sour atmosphere politically. I mean, one thing that one person said, and I really agree with them on this, is, you know, one of the benefits of public life here is a lot of famous people don't have to walk around with security. But if things like this happen, then they might do that, because they might be like, well, I just can't trust ordinary people to treat me with respect.
We can only presume that this nasty email that went to all of their guests was probably not linked. What do you know about that?
No, I don't think it was linked. From what I know, from what's been reported, is they do know who it is. They know who's sending the email, but it's not someone close to them. And from what I know, he has started an investigation. He has contacted the police about it. So, I mean, it is they do see it as harassment, because I think something similar happened last year. The person sent round an email to their friends and family trying to damage their reputation.
But it's interesting, someone who's got hold of the guest list and all that sort of business. And
I know, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, so it raises some questions. But as I say, whatever the truth behind that, and it may all be total nonsense, who knows? But it's, you can imagine it's a bit uncomfortable for the guests, actually.
Just awful. I mean, yes, and like you say, you know, obviously everyone will just be talking about this Just Stop Oil moment, but then they'll also be talking about the email as well. So, I mean, you know, it's not just a happy day. There's all these sort of events surrounding it, which will have cast a bit of a pall, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the guests arrive there, including David and Samantha Cameron, of course.
Interestingly, Ed Balls was there.
Was he indeed?
Ed Balls, who was his opposite number, wasn't he?
Yeah, but you make friends in the world of politics on all sides, don't you?
You do.
But there's no doubt that, Candice, that the reception afterwards, sitting down to the meal and toasting the bride and groom, would have been very tainted by just sort of nasty gossip.
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's such an apt name to call it a poison pen, because it absolutely is. And I mean, you know, from what I know, some of the accusations in there were deeply, deeply personal. I mean, they were really designed to hurt. And it just shows that, you know, words can be very painful. I mean, if you want to damage someone, one of the ways to do it is to try and hurt their reputation and to cast suspicion over their relationship. And so I don't blame him trying to find out who this is, because it definitely 100% is a form of harassment.
OK. Candice, got to leave it there. Good to see you this morning, though. Thanks very much.
You as well.
Yeah, and Michelle in Oxford says that woman who threw orange paper over George Osborne and his wife at their wedding should be arrested. A wedding is one of life's most special occasions. Not the day to do it.
No, probably not. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through. GB Views at gbnews.com. We've got all the Sunday newspapers heading away very shortly. This is GB News. Welcome back. It is 7:42. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Shall we have a quick look through the newspapers? The Times leads with the BBC crisis as a TV presenter is alleged to have paid a teen for sex photos.
In the Sunday Telegraph, George Osborne's wedding day was disrupted by a protester who threw orange confetti over him and his wife.
The Sunday People says plain stupid Tories as the government spends $800,000, apparently, on painting a UK flag on Rishi Sunak's jet.
And the Sunday Express says banks have been accused of putting the nation's security at risk by refusing to do business with Britain's defence industry.
So let's go through what some of the papers are saying. Join us this morning, writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. I was thinking, Fraser, if I had a plane, I'd have a diamond on the back. But Rishi Sunak's getting a Union Jack. Tell us about Sir Keir Starmer.
So, this is an interesting story. Ed Miliband, Keir Starmer's sort of energy and environment spokesperson, was giving this big presentation on Labour's, revolutionary plans to make Britain a clean energy superpower. And after the presentation, Keir thanked Miliband, said that's all very nice. And then he sort of had a little aside. He said, we're not about tree hugging in this party. In fact, I hate tree huggers.
King Charles.
Did he say this on stage, in public?
We're getting reports that this is what he said. So this wasn't a public meeting by any
right. Okay. But he didn't say it in private.
He didn't say it in private. This is quite a pointed remark. And
I think it's an awful thing to say.
I think it's interesting because it shows that there is now a bit of a problem with. It's no secret that Labour's oil policy, for instance, the plan to block development in the North Sea has caused a lot of consternation. The unions are really opposed to it. Lots of people have said, it makes no sense. It's the sort of just stop oil policy. It will have an effect on jobs. It will be bad for energy prices. It will just mean importing oil and gas from elsewhere rather than actually stopping it. And there's also ULEZ is creating problems for Labour too. So in the upcoming by-election, where Boris Johnson's seat is, the candidate there is saying we need to pause ULEZ, even though that is a Labour policy. It's Mayor Sadiq Khan's policy.
But there's a middle ground with all of this. I mean, this is what I sort of think. It depends what you mean by a tree hugger. In some respects,
yeah.
but there's always a middle ground. You can't say, "I hate tree huggers."
I think what this is Keir Starmer is a flip-flopper. So he can't seem to find a middle ground on anything either. So he'll say one day that he supports quite radical environmental policies. Then he realises there's a public backlash, and he says, "Oh, I hate all that stuff." It's because of his own lack of principles that he's not able to, to articulate.
He doesn't seem to have a firm core. He doesn't seem to have firm convictions. It's not just the flip-flopping, which looks really bad. It's the fact that he doesn't seem to be. And whatever he means by tree huggers, it's dismissive. It dismisses the whole, in shorthand, it dismisses the whole environmental movement, doesn't it, in a way?
Yes.
Even though he probably meant it in a much more nuanced way. He probably meant swampy types that disrupt public events or something, activists.
Yeah.
But, I hate tree huggers is going to put a lot of people...
But have we actually seen video of him saying that or anything like that? Or is it just...
No, but it is... It's reported, quoted in the papers, so I think
he'll have to answer that one.
See, I feel particularly offended because I'm not a mad environmentalist like these protesters and things. I do like trees.
I love trees.
And I do occasionally hug a tree.
Have you hugged a tree?
I have hugged a tree, and I talk to my plants.
You need to talk to plants. I don't hug trees, but I definitely walk barefoot on grass and things like that. It's amazingly kind of grounding.
I love trees. I think trees are just so amazing because if they're big, they're old.
Space.
And you just think, what have those trees seen? What lovers have kissed underneath them?
Oh, yes.
You think about the history of a tree, I think that...
Have you got your initials carved into it? I've got
You've
my
carved initials in?
No, I've got a SD and DD and a heart on the tree in the garden carved in.
No, that's what trees should...
You old romantic.
I'm sure trees love that.
I love it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure Keir Starmer doesn't want to go around bulldozing trees either,
But
it would be a good look, would it?
But I think sorry.
Right, let's have a look at the Observer, Emma.
And speaking of trees... May I?
Yeah.
Virginia Woolf. There is a tree at one of their houses, or Virginia and Leonard's Woolf, and the trees are intertwined, and they used to call them Virginia and Leonard, and that's romantic.
That is
romantic.
Yeah. That is
Wonderfully old trees that sort of intertwine around each other.
Oh, that's very nice.
Oh, that's beautiful. You could do that, with your trees.
I could do.
Because you can train them. It takes years
to wrap them around.
But it would look lovely.
Might do no good if you're going to move house every 3 years. Now, who's this top Tory Brexiteer who wants to reopen the UK borders to EU workers?
So this is the Observer. This is the former George Eustace, the former Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, so he knows what he's talking about. He's calling for ministers to reopen UK borders, to have a reciprocal arrangement of about 2 years of temporary visas, whereby young EU workers could come over here to help with the... You're all looking very sceptical. To help... This is about the acute labour shortages in this country, basically, in the food industry, in the hospitality industry, in the pubs and bars and restaurants. At the moment, skilled workers, lawyers, insolvency experts, even disc jockeys can come to this country as skilled workers. But unskilled workers in the hospitality food industry, where we need them, can't come over. So he's saying this is ludicrous. The way to address the, the driving up of wages and prices and inflation is to get these people in. And apparently lots of EU countries, but Bulgaria, places like that, are quite interested in discussing these kind of reciprocal arrangements.
I just find it extraordinary.
Yes, because yesterday we were talking about a Home Office recommendation to the then Prime Minister, Liz Truss, that a good idea would be to just clamp down on migration, legal migration, just by not rescinding, but withholding visas for about a year or something.
I know.
And this is the sort of complete opposite.
It's a mess.
And he's claiming that this was a Theresa May Remainer part of the deal, that this wasn't part of the vision of Brexit to clamp down on these workers coming to this country. So, more woes about Brexit, more woes about the identity and the policy of...
I do have an issue with the idea that there are certain sectors in this country that can only be filled by foreign workers. Why aren't... And it's not to criticise them. It's to say, well, why aren't British people doing this?
What, the fruit picking and
the fruit picking,
labour?
but also,
HGV
things in
drivers.
hospitality. When did you last go to a restaurant and you were served by an English person? It becomes almost impossible now. They're all full of Europeans, and it's not to criticise them for wanting to come here and work. That's fine. Why aren't Brits wanting to pursue that as a career? And the more we just bring people in to do that job, the less more Brits are saying, well, that isn't for us.
I agree with you, but with respect, we're sitting in a nice warm television studio. We're not out there doing, driving HGVs or picking fruit or working in restaurants and bars. I don't know. It's years. I have done all... I've never driven an HGV and I've never picked fruit. But I have worked in restaurants and bars and stuff, and it can be nice, it can be unpleasant. So maybe the conditions are simply not
Is it so poorly
enough.
paid that a Brit wouldn't consider it, or is the perception of it that it's so poorly paid?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for wages to rise. I think that's one of the interesting things that's come out of it. He's not saying this explicitly, but he's saying we need to essentially, in order to get hold of inflation, we need to keep wages down. And you do think, well, we've had the biggest squeeze in wages over the past 10 or so years, in centuries, not just in decades. Wouldn't it be a bad thing if they went up a bit? Yeah. But Brexit doesn't mean an end to immigration either. We should be debating these issues.
Exactly.
What's right for the country?
We've got to leave it there, sadly. Fraser, Emma, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
Now, it is a Sunday, and you might be thinking of DIY, which we'll be talking about later, or gardening. What about those flowers, beautiful flowers dotted around our houses, traditionally, and in our living rooms? However, many British flower growers have been put out of business because of the rise of foreign gardening.
Yeah, but they're fighting back. The Association of Flower Farmers says its membership has doubled in the last 5 years.
So how can we support our local British flower farmers? Joining us now is garden designer Anthony Henn. Ooh, lovely look. Very busy already. Morning, Anthony.
Morning, guys. How are you?
We are well. You're already up and at it, watering your flowers. And I know I've been there, visited you there, haven't I? You've got this many enormous greenhouses full of flowers.
Come anytime, Anne. It was good to see you. Yeah, I'm here with my niece, Philippa, who's a trained florist and houseplant expert. And the whole story about flower farms, I mean, it's funny because I was thinking about it the other day. There's so many small little businesses popping up all over the country, growing their own flowers from rented pieces of land. There's a wonderful one in Dorset, which I know the guys really well. We started doing it here at our nursery. So with our bee and butterfly borders that we sell, a lot of those flowers that we've got here, like the lovely Achilles and even a wild thistle, can all be used for flower arrangements. So what I'm trying to encourage people to do is in their own gardens, we've created a raised bed here. We've planted all the sort of flowers for picking, and it's just such a brilliant thing. If you can get homegrown flowers grown in this country, if we can support that, don't rush into the garage forecourt and buy a horrible bunch of flowers from Kenya or Israel. Try and go for British ones. They're hard to find, but the more we can support flower farms and local flower producers, the the industry will hopefully get back on its feet again.
So what you're saying is when we go to the florist and get something nice made up for a relative or whatever, they're all imported, are they?
Pretty much. I would say, unless you find a flower farm, so if anybody's really interested, which hopefully people are, if you go on the internet, find your local flower farm, there's probably one within maybe 10 miles from you. And if you can buy from there, as you can see with the flowers we've got here, we've picked this out of our own raised bed. But you can do some imaginative things like, this is digitalis, foxglove with the old seed heads. I've got a thistle here, which actually is just a wild thistle, but looks amazing. Philippa is doing a fabulous job. Look at that. That is a homegrown hydrangea Annabelle, which everybody should have in their garden anyway. We use a lot of these in our shady borders, salvias. And the great thing is, though, if they're here, they're obviously supporting the British industry. A lot of people are getting into wildlife, flowers, plants. Young people are coming to work at our place who are really interested in this, interested in the environment. And this all helps the whole ethos of looking after our country, our planet, and nature in general. So buy British if possible, but they're hard to find, so we've got to support them.
You've done a wonderful arrangement just talking to us. Thank you so much. Breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Thanks very much.
Come and see you soon. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Well, hopefully it's going to be reasonable to get out into the garden today. Here's the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They will turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that will lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 9th of July. Today, another crisis at the BBC. An unnamed star is at the centre of a sex scandal. So what next for the state broadcaster?
Rishi Sunak paid a visit to Selby yesterday in support of his candidate, Claire Holmes. What did they hear on the doorstep?
The robot will see you now. New studies suggest that robotic doctors can give better advice than GPs. Can the AI transform the health industry?
And a latest report shows that it seems a whopping 65% of Brits are now absolutely clueless when it comes to basic DIY.
And, of course, we'll bring you the very latest weather updates.
Hello there, we've seen plenty of heavy showers and thunderstorms this weekend so far. Will there be more today? We'll find out soon in the latest weather forecast.
I'm Stephen Dixon. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
The wife and I, says John. Good morning, John. I'm having a quiet morning, enjoying watching you, because our youngest grandson, Ossian, is having his christening at 1 o'clock today, so a boozy afternoon is in store.
Ossian, that's an interesting name.
I've never heard that before.
No, but I've heard of a boozy christening before.
I wonder if it's Ossian. It sounds like it could almost be Old English.
Ossian.
Oh, it's Welsh. Oh, Ossian.
Is it Ossian? We're being told. Oh.
And Welsh.
Nice one. Tom in Bury St Edmunds says, I'm in bed watching you, having a second cup of tea, and then I'm off to Bury St Edmunds Farmers Market. Lots of great local produce, eggs, honey and jams. My favourite super monthly event.
Oh, yes.
That sounds perfect Sunday.
We're talking about DIY a little bit later on. Naomi in Devon says, my husband is so inept at DIY and I call it destroying yourself. He was so
destroying it yourself. Oh,
yeah.
I see.
He was so proud of the things he built from mismatched rubbish he found in the shed. He even took pictures and put them on Facebook. I said, do that again and you'll be under the patio on Facebook, and she got suspended from the platform.
Oh, yes, maybe that's one of those trigger phrases you're not allowed to use.
Well, maybe it's very Brookside, isn't it?
Yeah. The problems of selling a house. We were talking about that earlier. And Darren says, my house in Milton Keynes sold 3 times in 24 hours over 6 months in 2022. All of the sales broke down over finance issues with buyers. One occurred 24 hours before exchange. We took the house off the market for a year to get over the stress. Selling a house makes work look like a holiday.
Well, David says we moved into our new property very recently. We put our old house on the market. It was sold in 6 minutes.
Woo. When? Surely not recently.
6 minutes. Mind you, you'd resent paying the estate agent's fees.
Yes.
That was sorry, Jeremy.
Minutes. Yeah.
Because, I mean, that costs thousands and thousands. I've never paid them, estate agent's fees. Never paid them. I've always managed to sell it privately.
How do you do that?
I've had because you can say it's on the market. You can put it on the market. Yeah. But then I've had like neighbours or things. So I've got a friend who's interested. I know your house is up for sale. I've got a friend who's interested, and therefore you can sell it privately.
Well, that's the way to do it if you can. Kitty says, I'm moving house soon and I have decluttered and got rid of or donated almost 80% of my stuff. It is so freeing and feels fantastic. I now know I'm only taking the stuff I really need with me to my next property. I can't recommend decluttering enough.
Ouch. Kathy says, over 2 days, all of our possessions were loaded onto the van, only to be told at 5 p.m. on the second day that the house sale would not complete.
Oh.
We had to borrow a blow-up bed, kettle, cups and all that and sit in an empty house for 3 days.
Oh, that's why it's so stressful moving house. Because everything's got to tie up. That's why it would be so lovely to have the money to be able to sell one house and then wait and then buy another at a better price. But I don't think that's possible most of the time.
Some people love moving.
Yeah, I know, I don't understand that.
No, I don't get that. I like to move to somewhere and settle. Properly settle for,
Anyway, tell us your stories.
20 or 30 years.
Yeah. No, I quite agree with you.
How long have you been in yours? You've been in yours a long while.
No, this one only about 8 years.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is relatively nothing, isn't it? But I still feel... When people say, how long have you been in that one, I feel like saying a couple of years, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, same with mine.
Yeah. But I planted a lot of trees at the beginning, and they are big now.
See, that's nice.
And then, yes, they weren't even there 8 years ago.
See, I like seeing the garden develop.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of work in the garden at the minute. It's lovely. Really love it.
Anyway, we're having a very Sunday conversation, so if you want to join in, let us know what you're up to. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a chat about something which is sort of light and easygoing, because actually the stuff happening today is worrying.
Yeah.
Actually, disturbing for a whole host of different reasons, actually.
It's very Sunday newspaper-ish, though.
Yeah.
Today it's about the BBC, who have been rocked over allegations that one of their biggest names, a household name, a TV presenter, sent and received sex pictures from a teenager.
Yeah, now, the BBC star also allegedly parted with bosses quite some time after the complaint had been made by the parent to the BBC.
So, of course, there are obvious questions, not only about who is it, this person we're talking about, but how has the BBC handled it? And in the wake, of course, what happened at ITV with Philip Schofield, management is coming in for potential criticism, apart from anything else. Let's see if Stephanie Tecci is available. She should be joining us from Rotterdam. Hello there, Steph.
Good morning, Anne and Stephen.
Now, I mean, all our viewers watching throughout the morning, as we and you have been chatting about it, know now that you know who this person is. You're not going to say so at the moment, obviously, until you can be sure. But everybody wants to know. And while the BBC go on just saying it's one of our household names, unfortunately, all the other household names at the BBC are having to defend themselves against allegations.
Sadly, Anne, this has become a game of Cluedo online on social media, where people are trying to figure out who done it. And because the BBC haven't so far handled this situation quite swiftly and correctly, there's other names such as Ryland Clark, Nikki Campbell, Gary Lineker, Jeremy Vine. These are some of the top BBC names who've had to come out and said, look, I am not this male presenter in question. And the reason why they've been forced to do this, because as we've seen over the weekend, this story has been splashed on the front of newspapers about a household star. So this is a name that we all know and that we've all watched on the BBC before, has been involved in this scandal. And because we don't know the name more publicly, we don't know who the name is, people are doing this guessing game. And it's a shame, because then, someone like Nikki Campbell yesterday says that he has to defend himself from trolls, because that's what it is now. It's the public are having their 2 pence worth on this situation. And I think over the next few days, there's going to be more that's going to come out with this story. It's quite damaging to think that one of the BBC's most loved stars has been involved in such a situation with a young teenager.
There are questions, when you look at the detail of the allegations that have been made, there are questions as to, I mean, not just the moral question here, but whether there is criminality involved in this. I mean, Ali in North Shields has been in touch and said the BBC should have when they were made aware of this, which was back in May, they should have straight away handed it over to the police. Well, of course, I mean, it's a key question, isn't it, for the BBC management now?
It's a hard one, Stephen, because it's always this thing where you're innocent until proven guilty. There is evidence which is needed to stand up such an allegation, even though the mother in question of this teenager has said that they've seen payment from this presenter over the past 3 years to their child in return for sexual pictures and other things. So far, the only evidence that is out there at the moment is the mother, who's saying that she's seen these financial payments, but it's up for the BBC to investigate further what the star has to say about this situation and what other evidence they can use. So this is what makes it quite tricky. I know the BBC and other media outlets get a bad rep when these situations happen, but they tend to be new territory. Each situation is different. I know we've had situations, whether it's Jimmy Savile or the Philip Schofield, each situation needs to be handled with care, and you don't really want to throw one of your biggest stars under the bus if it's just hearsay. But the newspapers do have a lot of information on this story. It's a story which I think people have been sitting on for a few weeks, and it just seems like over the past few days it's got more steam. And I think over the next few days to come we will be hearing more.
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of anyone watching and listening at the moment who hasn't been able to read about it yet, that it is alleged that, in fact, it started with a mother going to the BBC and complaining that one of their big presenters was online or sending and receiving sexual pictures with her teenage child. Alleged at the time to have been 17. And in the end, she saw it herself. She saw one of the pictures herself and went to the BBC and complained about it. But that was back May the 19th.
May the 19th.
May the 19th. And then she became very, very worried when she continued to see this particular star still on air. And she was very shocked about that. Not only is it horrible, the whole idea of it, but it could be potentially criminally bad, because it is an offence to make, distribute, possess or show any indecent images of anyone aged under 18, even if it's created with the young person's consent. And so it goes on. I mean, the potential for this being criminal is huge, isn't it, Stephanie?
It's massive, Anne, and I think this is what's quite sad. As someone who's previously worked for the BBC, you know, they give you so much training on how to handle situations when you're involved with teenagers, minors, and the BBC always like to uphold this image of being a very broadcaster that is full of integrity and values, and it's been quite controversial for the BBC. They've had a rocky few years, so for this to kind of slip under the net, there's going to be a lot of answers that need to be questioned. And I just think it's one of those situations when you're dealing with a very young, vulnerable person. What's come out with this story is that the money that this teenager supposedly was receiving from this presenter, it was to fund a drug habit, which has made this mother speak out, because she, as any mother knows, watching your child being taken by a drug addiction, it's quite hard to watch. And to know that this presenter is involved, it's very scandalous and it's very heartbreaking. So I don't know how BBC bosses have managed to let this slip under net, and if it is true that this presenter also partied with bosses after the allegation came. It's like, we're in 2023 now, we've had so many different controversies in the media industry, and it's just no excuse, really.
Steph, you work in newspapers. That's your sort of main job when you're not with us. What is your understanding of evidence which has been collected? Because this is going to, as you say, hearsay is not good enough. It's a case of whether the newspapers have decided to run with this because they feel they have evidence. Is that the case?
Yes, newspapers, for it to get to the front page of national newspapers, the newspapers are not done. They're not going to publish a story which has no legs to it. For instance, the Philip Schofield story, people sat on that for years because legally we couldn't have put that story out there until we had the proper evidence, or until Philip Schofield himself confessed. And it's the same with this story. The mother of the teenager has probably provided the pictures, probably provided the statements for the newspapers to feel comfortable enough to go press ahead with this. Just a few weeks ago, one of my team, we had a tip-off on a story about the same presenter. Again, it's quite shocking. We thought, is this true? But we held off on it for a while. So now that this has actually got more steam, there's no smoke without fire when it comes to news stories. I know newspapers get a lot of bad rep, but sometimes it is to hold such broadcasters such as the BBC to account.
The Philip Schofield story, as journalists say, ran and ran and ran for weeks. Front page news, pretty torrid stuff every day for weeks. And is this going to be equally big, do you think, when eventually it comes out?
I think so. Knowing, if I'm right on who the person is, I think this is someone who's held in such high regard and has had an amazing broadcasting career. It's quite annoying with these situations because it does become a big witch hunt, and I know for viewers it becomes quite jarring hearing the same story over and over again. But I think there's been many calls for this industry to kind of wake up and deal with these kind of situations effectively, especially when you're the BBC and and you're taking the public's money. They want to know that all your stars are people we can trust. And so there has to be a big change with this. But I do think this story will develop over the next few days / weeks.
OK. Stephanie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's alleged that the TV presenter paid £35,000 to this young person in exchange for pictures. And £35,000 is a lot of money. So it has to be somebody who's pretty well paid as well, frankly. But paid with licence payers' money, by the way, the BBC. It makes it even worse, if it can be. Philip says, I'm so glad our TV licence fee goes on these ridiculous wages to be spent on presenters being disgusting. There should be no protection for anyone like that.
Martin says nobody should be judged by the media until all the facts are known, which, again, is a valid point.
Yeah.
It is a valid point. What I find astounding, or maybe it's, I don't know, well, what do you think? That someone who is in the public eye, if this is true, it's a big if this is true, would do something as daft as I mean, obviously, making themselves actually known to this person and doing something which is daft.
But time and again, when you see scandals a bit like this, the person in question is obsessed. While they might seem rational to most people, they still have some sort of deep obsession where they just become completely reckless. How many politicians have we seen utterly wreck their careers with some stupid dalliance? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It happens to men, I think, more than women.
Yes, yeah, I think it does.
You throw your family and career away doing something utterly stupid, and in this case, even potentially criminal. I don't know. I think we are all going to be very shocked at some point, aren't we, when we learn who it is?
Yes, we are. Now, let's move on, though, should we, from that, onto something we can actually talk about a bit more freely. That's Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. What a lot of pressure he's under at the moment. We all know it's 5 pledges, which, you know, he's not managing to meet, let's be perfectly honest.
5 by-elections.
Yes, 5 by-elections, which are putting him under an awful lot of pressure, because even if you've got a huge majority, polls look like you're going to lose, the Conservatives will lose that seat. Anyway, he started the campaign. He went to Selby yesterday in support of their candidate there in that by-election that's coming up.
Yeah, but it must be tough for them because the latest polling data shows that Labour could potentially have a 12-point lead as hopes grow of a shock win. OK, let's talk to our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Morning, Olivia. I mean, this is... You can't imagine, actually, what the Conservatives are going to have to try to put into all of these by-elections when they know they are really up against it.
Well, absolutely. Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are now fighting on 5 different fronts, and it is beginning to look more than plausible that they could lose every single one of these 5 by-elections. Selby in North Yorkshire, where Nigel Adams has recently resigned, is perhaps the one that they're the most worried about. They have a majority there of nearly 20,000, which in ordinary times would be considered completely safe. But there are quite a lot of aggravating factors which makes it actually possible that Labour could overturn it. One is that Nigel Adams resigned at a surprise move. He was a very close ally of Boris Johnson's, and his local constituents, his members, the Conservative Party members, really weren't expecting him to step down. That's caused a lot of anger in that particular constituency and has meant that lots of Tory activists who would normally be out on the campaign trail knocking on doors have decided simply to stay at home. Also, Labour have decided to throw absolutely everything they've got at this Selby by-election. There are those who suggest that the Lib Dems could actually be in a better position to overtake the Tories, but Labour finds that really annoying because Labour would absolutely love this seat. It has never been held by Labour before, and it's in a real Tory heartland. It's a well-to-do English town in a rural location that you would expect to be really, really low fruit for the Conservatives. So Keir Starmer is going to be up there. We're going to see lots of Labour shadow ministers up there. We're going to see probably thousands of activists descend on Selby to try and win it. And in the meantime, Rishi Sunak has got to do everything that he possibly can, while also fighting 4 other by-elections, one of which, of course, is in Uxbridge, which has just a 7,000 majority. And it's really, really important for the Tories to hold on to as many of these seats as possible, not just to sustain that majority that they've got in the House of Commons, but also to prove to the general electorate that the momentum isn't all with Labour. And that's a real worry for Rishi Sunak at the moment. In really what we're talking about is the run-up to the general election now.
In normal times, I guess Rishi wouldn't be wheeled out for every single by-election campaigning, but he probably is going to have to do that, isn't he?
Yeah, he's definitely going to have to do that. A big worry for the Conservatives is that loyal Conservative voters are simply going to stay at home. They won't switch to Labour, the people who would sort of never consider voting Labour, but won't go out to vote Conservatives. They haven't, they believe, been given a sort of reason to vote Conservative. So that is why we will be seeing so much of Rishi Sunak in these seats over the next few weeks. He also wants to combat this idea from Labour, which is gaining quite a lot of traction, really, that Rishi Sunak is a sort of technocrat, isn't a proper campaigning Prime Minister. He's only been in Parliament for the last 7 or 8 years. He is a bit wet behind the ears, if you like, and he wants to show that he is a Prime Minister who is willing to get on the campaign trail, willing to roll up his sleeves, willing to try and win people over. So I expect we will see a lot more of Rishi Sunak, not just in Selby, but in those 4 other constituencies as well.
Yeah, you're out and about in Rochester, as we can see this morning. Beautiful Rochester Castle behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, that had a bit of a history, didn't it, with by-elections 10 years or so ago. Mark Reckless, wasn't it, who was a Tory, defected to UKIP, and then held a by-election, but won it.
Yeah, in fact, the only UKIP MP ever to actually win a seat. Yeah, Kent, where I am down here, is the place where UKIP candidates often try their luck. It is pretty close to the Channel, and obviously it bears the impact of mass immigration over the Channel, of those small boats crisis. So, yeah, this is going to be another area where the Tories are going to have to try really, really hard at the next general election. Rishi Sunak has said over and over again that it is his mission to stop the boats. But so far, we don't seem to be seeing much of an impact of that. In fact, over the last couple of days, there have been 700 migrants come over on those small boats. That's a record for the last year. So how Rishi Sunak is going to deal with that, on top of all of the other problems he's got in these various constituencies up and down the country, it'll be really interesting to see.
That's interesting too, but that's going to be a major consideration then when they're knocking on doors and trying to gain votes. Who else is fighting in that area? Because usually, traditionally, the Lib Dems. What have I got?
No, well, there isn't a by-election in Rochester this time. Oh, no.
Oh, there isn't?
No, there isn't. That was a by-election in 2014.
Ah,
so,
right, OK. No, I was going to say that must be a big consideration, yeah. But I mean, Lib Dems traditionally do very well in by-elections, don't they? Because they're awfully good at putting in local work. So, I mean, are they going big on these by-elections?
Oh, they absolutely are. And in fact, Selby is one where the Lib Dems think that they have a fighting chance. Keir Starmer is said to be frustrated at the fact that in Selby and the surrounding area, politicos on the ground think that it is a race between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. It's a rural seat, and rural seats tend to be pretty popular with the Lib Dems. And they also, people are willing to vote Lib Dem in a by-election in a way that they might not be prepared to in a general election, because it's seen as more of a sort of protest vote. It isn't going to change who the government is. If you're voting in a by-election, you're not picking the Prime Minister. So if you're fed up with the 2 main parties, you might be willing to, as it were, sort of throw away your vote on a third smaller party. So the Lib Dems will be putting in a lot of effort here. Of course, the Lib Dems also have a sort of smaller campaigning base, so by-elections suit them quite well. They're able to send a big bunch of their activists up to each of the different constituencies rather than trying to fight all different fronts all over the country. So yeah, I think in quite a few of these seats it's going to be a 3-way race, and that makes it even more difficult for Rishi Sunak.
OK. Olivia, thank you very much indeed. See you a little bit later on. Still to come, away from the sort of real world, if you like, to AI. And could some sort of robot replace your GP? This is Breakfast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They'll turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that'll lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And in most places, dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, good morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, or are you?
What?
Perhaps we're artificial intelligence.
Oh, one day we will be. But you won't have to get out of bed in the morning.
No, we might be
Just send your... What do you call it? Your
thingy.
Avatar. Send your avatar to go and do the programme.
We could be deep fake. You know, we could be doing anything, couldn't we? It's all very clever.
We probably are.
Now, someone who knows all about AI is futurist and broadcaster Andrew Osborne, who's here. Good morning.
Good morning, here in the flesh as well. Love to see
there's
both
been lots
you.
of panic about AI lately, lots of concern. You actually work with a lot of big tech companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is going on?
Well, Stephen Hawking said it's our greatest human achievement, but also potentially our biggest existential threat. And like anything that people don't really fully understand, there's a lot of fear involved. People think Goldman Sachs said it's going to replace 300 million jobs are going to be lost as a result of it. People are going to think they're going to lose their GPs and so on and so forth.
Well, you see, that's what got me, because I have to say that you're speaking to two people who hate talking AI, because it just goes, don't know what, we can't grasp it. But we saw this story today about the fact that it is a legitimate thought that perhaps an AI-type intelligence or a robot or something could replace our GPs, could become the first level of healthcare in this country. So instead of going to your GP with, pimple on your arm,
yes,
you actually ask the AI about it.
It's very good, absolutely. And it's a report in the Mail today. They talk about Dr. Ellie versus Dr. AI. And actually what they did, they asked it 5 questions and they valued the response. So 3 doctors looked at the responses from Dr. Ellie and the response from Dr. AI.
And these were 5 questions that were proper sort of patient problems.
Yes, but there were 5 questions, but quite complicated, yeah. And they were surprised at how good it was. Actually, the reason this came about was actually from the University of California in San Diego, who did a much wider research on basically 195 exchanges on Ask Docs on Reddit. And the Reddit is used by, I think there's like 452,000 people post their answers. And it's completely blind. They looked at all the doctors' responses, and they then said, OK, the AI, let's look at similar responses. And what they found out is that they thought that they were higher quality and also more empathetic from the AI. So it really depends on how you ask them, because they've got more time to do it. So I appreciate the Mail have done this. They've asked 5 questions as opposed to the 195 picked at random, but they've done this. The reality is this, is firstly, people are frightened of what they don't know. Artificial intelligence is tremendous in terms of a really powerful tool for what it can do. So give you an example, a superbug, which has killed 1 million people. What AI managed to do was come up with a potential solution to that, which would have taken people years and years and years to do. It's a really powerful tool. And what it can do is it can disseminate information. I spoke very recently, Rishi Sunak was at the conference, the tech conference we had here in London, and I was at the AI summit as well as part of that. And he was saying, look, we should be at the very front and centre of AI around the world. And is that good for the economy? It's phenomenally good for the economy. We punch way above our weight in AI. We're one of the best in the world at doing it. But what we have to do is make sure people understand. It will basically be a tremendous tool. There are concerns, however, because it can do things like create. And we talk about the deep fakes. We talk about the Pope in a puffer jacket, Yeah. The devil may wear Prada, but the Pope prefers puffer, is what they say. But you have to basically question everything. The other big issue is about hallucinations. Because AI, if it doesn't know an answer, it's rather like lots of reports in the media, they try and fill the vacuum. So you work on that sort of basis. It will make things up. I'll give you an example. They had a lawyer in America. He was representing a particular client in a negligence claim by an airline. The particular client was hit by one of these trolleys, and they basically were looking for cases. So they asked the AI chatbot, give us some cases, and the AI chatbot quoted this airline sued by this person and so on and so forth, and it came up with 3 of those. The lawyer went to court and said these 3 cases very confidently, and the judge looked at him rather puzzled and said, hang on, none of these are true. And what had happened is the AI had made every single one up. Because it didn't know the answer. So the short answer is this, you have to understand the limitations of AI, but also work on the basis that you can fill those voids.
But isn't part of the problem with all this, as we investigate and worry about it all, that AI, we talk about AI doesn't exist yet.
Well, it's basically, it's that wonderful term, everything is AI. So you have to start with what's a definition. Basically, artificial intelligence is the way that machines can replicate human behaviour.
Yeah, so they're not actually using it. All they're using is what the input that we've given them, actual AI, where machines can think for itself, hasn't been invented.
It's very good. It's what's called narrow AI, which is you give a specific task. So you say to Alexa, switch on GBNews, it will switch on GBNews, all happening around the country now. Yes. You work on that sort of basis, as opposed to something where you've got sentient and that sort of side. It doesn't think for itself. And all this bit about that sort of stuff, it's only as good as the input. So you've got to make sure that the data, and data is the new currency. What? You know, we talk about threads and so on and so forth. Data is the new currency.
To put to AI how we should deal with another pandemic?
Oh, absolutely, and they will come up with answers, but what it's doing is looking at the different things. The great thing from a medical point of view is you can put in things, and I speak to lots of doctors around the world about this, if you give them lots of x-rays to compare, it is very good at disseminating lots of information and say, oh, hang about, based on this, it's likely to be this. And all the people that I've spoken to in the medical profession have said, actually, that's a really, really powerful tool. So rather than scaremongering people, we have to work on the basis of, look, how can it be used? The other point to make, and saying all due respect to our friends in the Mail today, is that it continues to learn. So if you want to say, hang about, let's give us a bit more empathy, let's learn from the mistakes, because it's only as good as the data. And what I would always say is that make sure there's a human somewhere in the chain. Yeah. Because we have it passing medical exams, we have it passing bar exams around the world from legal, and the Master of the Rolls over here, he was basically saying we should be using AI in the legal profession to help basically with efficiencies. Let's make sure that people happen and that sort of thing. But it's dealing with your point. People are worried that you don't see a real human. If you cannot get an appointment with a doctor, wouldn't it be fantastic that you can speak to something that can give you reassurance, can give you empathy?
Consider it reliable.
Oh, no, absolutely, and that's that sort of safeguard. But if it can deal with a lot of the admin to make that more efficient, so the NHS is not just about money, it's about efficiencies. So that's what AI can do. Also,
isn't that what's happening a lot with what I can't think of the exact term you'll know, but it's like a wide-based AI.
Exactly. So you have
so it's not just like with Alexa where you have to ask a specific question.
Yes.
But Bing have introduced it now, haven't they, Microsoft, where actually you can ask a much vaguer question in a much more human way, and it will dig up the information.
Absolutely, and that's the great thing about it. It's looking, and I always try and be positive about the side, because what we do is, it's the father of PR, Edward Bernays, he always said the easiest way of selling anything is through fear. And what happens is the media give you these horrible headlines. Every single day there's an AI story. And what we looked is to turn around and say, look, these are the great things that can be achieved, the great advances in medicine, the seismic advances in entertainment. But you need to make sure that you deal with the commercial side, because you have what's generative AI, which can come up with telling stories. You come up with, we had the fake Drake and the Weekend song, which basically was completely made up, but it fooled the industry into thinking they'd collaborated. And it was phenomenal. What we need to look at, though, there are issues about copyright, because obviously you need to make sure that people are adequately rewarded, but also to make sure that we deal with these things like hallucinations so it doesn't make it up.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating stuff.
It is amazing.
Really good to see you.
Lovely to see you. Good point, well made, though, that we have not yet got sentient AI. No. So that is at least reassuring.
Yes, because that does have its own special concerns.
That becomes a little more frightening.
Lovely. Andrew, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We've got all the papers and the sport heading away very shortly. This is Breakfast. 8:43 morning, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Right,
should we
now,
talk papers?
Yes, let's go through the papers. We've got Emma Wolf with us and Fraser Myers. And if we start with you, Emma, you've been looking in the Times about COVID fines.
Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting story in the light of all the kind of fixed penalty notices and didn't they have some birthday cake kind of discussions we've had for months, well, over a year now, about politicians. Teenagers who can't pay their COVID party fines are now being slapped with criminal records. This is so unfair. This is many, 57,000 under 25-year-olds who were students, who were starting university at the beginning of lockdown, who wanted to gather in groups of more than 5 and maybe had little parties, are being, well, first of all, they were fined 200. In some cases, this has now escalated to 2,500. When they can't pay that, they're now being issued with criminal records. Amazingly, around half of all the people who were issued with fixed penalty notices were aged 18 to 24 during the pandemic, when, you know, those are the people who desperately needed...
Remember, it was at the beginning, and you felt... And we saw those terrible pictures. I think it was from Nottingham Uni, wasn't it? The pictures of the kids up against the glass, sort of looking at the outside world.
Looking at the outside world.
I mean,
this is people getting together to talk to other students, to talk to their peers at the age when you desperately need kind of social interaction, quite apart from any kind of university experience.
Well, in the light of the Sean Bailey party, the Jingle and Mingle party...
And he's been in no...
Which were organised with full knowledge and understanding of the rules that they were breaking, the restrictions that they had invented and were then completely flouting and lying about.
Yeah. So if they did that, you can't give a load of teenagers criminal...
And this is going on and on and on. There's a young woman here who's literally facing, you know, a criminal record because she can't pay £2,500 because she couldn't pay the original fine, and she went to a party and she just started at uni.
But if you've got any common sense and they did let them off, there are probably thousands of other people in this country who did.
There are. 3 years on, thousands of cases are still going through the courts, and some people are being fined up to £10,000 for hosting slightly larger gatherings, parties.
Well, some people sort of flouted it completely, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a balance between a huge rave and getting together with other students.
But how do you decide who has a decent case for, you know, being forgiven?
I think all the restrictions were bonkers from the beginning and utterly wrong-headed, and I think the politicians have proved that because they broke the rules themselves.
Well, they're going to have to pay back some of the fines then, aren't they, if that's what they do? It's a difficult one to know what to do now, but after all the stories that have come out, as you said, how can you possibly go ahead and fine teenagers?
It's all... Whether you think the restrictions were right or wrong, actually, and I've got to say, I generally think it was the right idea. Maybe not with hindsight, but at the time. But that's a separate argument.
Yeah, the balance. The balance of...
But it's the balance of when you see what has happened in that particular party where the video was released, you can't then pursue
other people.
For
and what a waste of legal resources to be pursuing thousands of people through the courts for something that happened 3 years ago. You know, let's just be honest, it's over now. We have to move on. Is it really worth pursuing these young people, giving them a criminal record for rules which, as you say, may or may not be, you know, may or may not have made sense?
I really think an amnesty is the way to go.
Yes.
You know, cancel all these fines, give the money back. And as you said earlier, you know, some people were fined £10,000. That's a life-ruining amount of money.
I think that was students in Nottingham actually got £10,000.
Essentially, if you had a gathering of more than 6 people or something like that, and people would find that for organising protests as well, which is a really, you know, something that should never have been banned. You should always have the right to protest, pretty much, even during an emergency. Perhaps especially during an emergency when, you know, lots of people disagreed with the rules and thought that was something worth challenging. So it's a reminder of this kind of strange authoritarian time we lived through, and I think we need to, you know, recompensate.
And you have to weigh it up. You have to keep on the other side. I really think that isolating people, shutting them away, not allowing them to talk to other people is as damaging in some ways as possibly transmitting a virus which for many young people would not have been more than a bad flu.
But we didn't know it all that time.
Okay, but assessing, you know, risk, there is always a risk in anything. And, you know, let's shut people away if they get flu, frankly.
No, I just think that lessons have to be learned, but an amnesty might be a very good idea.
But
then that's tantamount to the government saying we got it wrong, and I can't see any government.
Well, they've already admitted that by breaking the rules themselves.
Let's look at the Sunday Times, Fraser, and the PM taking an ear bashing
Yeah, so there's been a lot of focus groups in the run-up to all these various by-elections, and voters are absolutely not happy. There's been some quite extraordinary things coming out of the focus groups, people saying that Sunak is like a snake, that he's as dead as a dodo. Lots of people... Basically, the mood has changed in a sense, because when Sunak took over, a lot of people were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They sort of blamed Liz Truss for messing up the economy and thought Sunak seems sensible, he will put us on the right path. But now, you know, almost a year later, actually things are worse. You know, there was a bit of a reversion to a bit of a recovery, but now things are worse. People's mortgages are higher than they were in the wake of the mini budget. Lots of the sort of complex, you know, none of us really care about gilt yields or whatever, but that does have an impact on people's finances. And people are saying, well, you know, this guy, he's presented himself as Mr. Fix-It. You know, what does he fix?
And we were told it's going to be better in the summer, you know, all this crisis about the cost of living. I think that's the main thing that people are really, really unhappy and anxious about. Inflation was going to come down. Food prices haven't. They are still, you know, extremely elevated, like 18, 19%. He had his... It was so dramatic after Liz Truss that he had his kind of, you know, it couldn't have been worse, really, after that dramatic entry into prime ministership. And things haven't got, as you say, they haven't got better, and MPs are unhappy as well.
And at the beginning of the year, people remember his big promise was to halve inflation. And a lot of economists...
And stop the boat, and do all the other things that he has not done.
He hasn't done. But a lot of economists took the mick out of Sunak when he announced that back in January, because they said, well, look, inflation's going to come down anyway, you know, whatever the government policy is. And it hasn't. It's really remained stubbornly high.
It must be very difficult for him on the doorsteps at the moment, mustn't it?
Because aside from not having fixed any of these problems that he said he was going to fix, he doesn't really have a positive vision for the country either. So, you know, you're thinking, what is it that I'm going to get if I vote for Sunak? He hasn't fixed these problems, and where is he going to take us?
Yeah, but what you're going to get voting for anybody else is a legitimate question, because if he hasn't got the answers, I don't know that anybody else has.
And Labour is essentially saying, you know, elsewhere in the Times, that they're going to stick to the Tory spending plans.
Yeah.
So that's really vote winner, isn't it?
Which is
it's all very odd.
They're copying the Blair playbook there, because that's what Tony Blair did before '97. Said, you know, we're going to stick to the Tories' rigid plans to almost say we're competent on the economy, but people don't trust the Tories for economic competence. So why
at the moment? We've got to leave it there. Emma, Fraser, it's been really good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Now, we've been talking about it all morning. A protester attempted to disrupt the wedding of the former Chancellor, George Osborne, to his long-term partner by throwing orange confetti at them as they left the church following the service.
Yes, the protester left smiling after being approached by security, and Just Stop Oil have retweeted a video of the incident, congratulating the newlyweds as they did it.
And earlier we spoke to writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, who said that no one should have their wedding disrupted.
I really disagreed with it. I just think that there are certain boundaries, and one of them is someone's wedding. You don't disrupt that. But I think Just Stop Oil don't cleave to those sorts of social norms. They do what they want to do when they want to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been criticised so much. I mean, if social media is anything to go by, across the political spectrum last night, people said, no, you don't disrupt someone's wedding. That's wrong. It doesn't matter what your political point is. But then when they were throwing paint at Van Gogh paintings, they didn't care then. And they said, you know, well, the climate emergency justifies it. But this is just such attention seeking. And I think what it's doing, though, is it's turning people off their cause, and it's making them really disagree with the tactics that they're using to try to get their point across. I mean, even their billionaire backers have said that they don't agree with it anymore. The whole thing's just gotten out of control.
Yeah, but look, I think the vast majority of people would agree and say, no, you shouldn't disrupt anyone's wedding. She didn't disrupt their wedding, did she? As they came out the church door, she walked up behind them and threw some... Confetti over them. It's not... I mean, they weren't disrupted. The whole thing lasted a couple of seconds and they smiled and carried on.
Well, I think that was more a smile of confusion. I mean, that's what I saw. They looked confused. I mean, Thea, she looked behind twice. What are you doing? I mean, that's supposed to be the moment for the bride and groom when they walk out of the church together to all their guests, and instead they had a stranger who they don't know just run up and start emptying confetti on them. And I thought that the last when she emptied the confetti at the last, before she was told to go away, that looked quite aggressive to me. I mean, she's not a friend of theirs.
No, that's what I think. You're a bride and you're coming out of the church, and it should be, you know, probably one of the happiest days of your life. And you don't know what's going to happen next when somebody comes up with a box of confetti.
No, and they're both quite well known as well. So, I mean, you have no idea if it's someone who is trying to be malicious towards you. Then they had that whole incident with the poison pen email. So, I mean, they might already be feeling a bit tense. I just, you know, I think that Just Stop Oil is creating a very sour atmosphere politically. I mean, one thing that one person said, and I really agree with them on this, is, you know, one of the benefits of public life here is a lot of famous people don't have to walk around with security. But if things like this happen, then they might do that, because they might be like, well, I just can't trust ordinary people to treat me with respect.
Well, fair point, May, but let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com.
It's the picture all over the front pages this morning.
Anyway, let's have a look at your weather today.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They'll turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that'll lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures starting to come down a little nearer to average. See you soon.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 9th of July. Today, another crisis at the BBC. An unnamed star is at the centre of a sex scandal. What next for the state broadcaster?
And Rishi Sunak paid a visit to Selby yesterday in support of his own candidate, Claire Holmes. So how do they think they're going to win it, eh? There he is on the doorstep.
Ramping up security, could the British Grand Prix be disrupted by, yes, you guessed it, environmental protesters?
And a report says that a whopping 65% of us are absolutely clueless when it comes to doing DIY at home.
No comment. And, of course, we'll bring you the latest weather.
There we've seen plenty of heavy showers and thunderstorms this weekend so far. Will there be more today? We'll find out soon in the latest weather forecast.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
BBC stories everywhere this morning.
I mean, it's a very Sunday newspaper-type story, I suppose, in the old-fashioned way. But, yes, it's absolutely everywhere at the moment.
It does raise a lot of questions, which... these are allegations. We don't know if they're true or not. The person involved hasn't been named. But there are questions as to why, if it is the case that the mother of this individual, of this 17-year-old, raised concerns on May the 19th to the BBC, why this person wasn't taken off air until it was hitting the newspapers.
And why, several weeks later, he was allegedly partying with BBC bosses at some sort of big event.
Yeah, so it does raise a lot of questions over all of this, but the papers have gone very big on it. The Mirror, well, all of them, but The Sun is the one that sort of broke the story. And they're now saying this morning, well, there was an image of this particular person sending pictures in his underpants, basically. Yeah. Well, have they got those pictures?
But if there were images... Yeah.
Have they got... It's all now about evidence, isn't it?
It doesn't take that long to gather together that sort of evidence. That's what I think is quite shocking. If The Sun has managed to gather enough evidence to convince them that they can splash it, they're doing everything but name the person. If they feel that strongly that they can splash it all over their front pages, then how come they didn't? How come the police or the BBC didn't know about it weeks ago?
Well, yes, and someone, I'm trying to find it, but I don't know if I can just see it now, but saying... oh, here we go. It was Ali in North Shields, says the BBC should have handed the accusations, at least, to the police to let them investigate it, as should the newspaper, who've chosen to profit from the story. Now, I suppose if the newspaper can't just go with allegations, but if they had
if they have evidence of what is potentially a criminal...
You see, I was of the mind, and a lot of you may be thinking, well, a 17-year-old, that's all legal, but it's not legal to get them to send pictures, is it?
No, it's not. It's illegal. It's against the Child and Criminal Protection Act or something like that. I looked it up a while ago. But yes, it is. Under the Protection of Children Act 1978, it is an offence to make, distribute, possess or show any indecent images of anyone aged and under 18, even if it was created with the young person's consent. It is also a criminal offence to ask a child under 18 to send a sexual image of themselves, and causing or inciting sexual exploitation of a child carries a maximum penalty of 14 years in prison. So there is a potential that this is a criminal problem.
But of course...
And if the newspapers knew that, and if the BBC knew it, they should have at some stage passed it on to the police.
You would think so, wouldn't you? So there are questions to be answered about that. But of course, and it is worth saying, this person who hasn't been named, but I'm afraid to say you can pretty much guarantee that name will be out this coming week. Yeah, innocent until proven guilty.
But the trouble is, while his anonymity is preserved because we're not naming him and nobody else is, it casts a shadow over every other big household TV name, male presenter at the BBC, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so many of them are having to come out and say, hang on a minute, it's not me.
It's not me. And that is a problem because people jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
Oh, it must be such and such. Yeah, well, you know...
So far, Gary Lineker, Ryland Clark, Jeremy Vine...
Nicky Campbell
have had to actually say, you can imagine the sort of things that they're reading about themselves on social media or whatever. They've had to actually come out and say, it was not me.
Yeah, so it's a very difficult situation. But we'll keep you abreast of that as best as we can. I mean, it's legally very difficult as well. So all I would say to you is, yes, it's a very it's an interesting and disturbing story. Don't jump to any conclusions about who it may be or what should happen to them or anything else. We need to actually get some facts on this one. So, but hopefully we will, and then we'll bring them to you. Now, let's talk about the Prime Minister, should we? Oh, what a difficult time he's having. He's got his 5 key promises that he hasn't stuck to as yet.
5 key promises and 5 by-elections.
Yeah, which aren't looking very promising. Even if you had a whopping great majority in a safe Tory seat, well, it's not safe enough now. He was campaigning in Selby yesterday on that one. Camilla Tominey is, of course, going to be here at 9:30. She joins us now. Good morning.
Morning.
It just goes to some bad to us for the PM, doesn't it?
The deliverables aren't being delivered, so that's a problem. The by-elections are looking dicey, to say the very least. I know it was in Selby that there was some polling last week. Opinion said that mid-beds, which has still not been vacated, Bernadine Doris. We're waiting for her to resign, but she hasn't yet. That could be lost as well, and that majority is even bigger, so it's 24 to 25,000. Now, an elections guru, Frank Luntz, had told the party a couple of weeks ago, he addressed the 1922 backbench committee, that any MPs under 15,000 should be worried. So you're then looking at the likes of our GBNews co-presenter, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and others who you would consider being very safe Tories, having to really campaign their hearts out.
What's his majority then?
So he's on 9,000, I think. No, that's wrong. He's on 14, but a boundary change makes it 16. So he's on the cusp. Sorry, I was thinking about Jake Berry as well.
Because he's he's very, very popular local MP, isn't he?
Yeah, of course. And people who are popular campaigning MPs obviously do have a degree of local support, but if the macro picture is one that sees the Tories facing another 1997 and people are so turned up, I personally think that apathy will be what does it for the Tories, in the sense that people just won't necessarily vote for Labour. There's lots of very disgruntled Conservatives that won't vote for Keir Starmer because they can't bring themselves to, and therefore they just won't turn out, and that's going to be the biggest problem.
But, you know, Labour, it's always the way when there's a party that's chomping at the bit, which the Labour Party is at the moment. Of course, the activists will go out in force because they think it's the opportunity.
And actually, I've heard that Tory activists have been disincentivised. A lot of them back Boris. They think the Tories were wrong to push him out. I know that's not necessarily a widely popular view around the country, but there's lots of grassroots people who, you know, Boris was an asset on the doorstep, and they haven't got him, and they haven't got the threat of Corbyn, and they haven't got the threat of Brexit being lost. So it's going to be different campaigning. By-elections are obviously different to the actual general election, but they're all issues that the Prime Minister needs to face. Now, I've got the perfect man to be discussing all this at 9:30, because Ian Duncan Smith is coming into the studio. And let's be honest, he knows about life in opposition. This whole mantra that's going around at the moment, which I find slightly staggering, that some Tories are saying, we need a period in opposition. You really don't. And I'm going to say to Sir Ian, what's it like being in opposition?
I bet it must be awful.
It's absolutely awful. You can't get on the telly. Nobody wants to hear your policy ideas. You know, you don't have any influence at all. You're not anywhere near the levers of power. Somebody else is pulling on the levers of power while you're having to watch. So I'll ask him about that. I'll also ask him about whether, well, what might happen to Rishi Sunak if he doesn't deliver his deliverables. I don't think there's any question of his leadership being challenged. He won't be hard up, but his popularity in the Tory party might continue to wane. The other bigwig I've got on, which is interesting because he doesn't often do GBNews, is Alan Milburn. And I'm speaking to him, former Labour bigwig, former shadow, former health secretary. He would now be in shadow if he was in the government now, but of course he's not. Social mobility czar. I'm going to speak to him about the NHS, 75 years old this week. Wasn't it Tony Blair who said back in 1997, we have 24 hours to save the NHS? What happened to that pledge, Anne?
Yeah.
Well, he cut waiting lists down, didn't he?
He did cut waiting lists.
Dramatically, he pledged to, and he did.
But what's interesting is you've got Blair now talking about a degree of part privatisation. His institute in the week said, why don't we let wealthier patients jump the queue? Well, what does the likes of Alan Milburn think of that? I don't think it's something that Keir Starmer would advocate.
It's a very odd thing to say.
But, I mean, he's talking about...
Well, I suppose the argument is it just eases up the pressure.
But it doesn't, though, because I always thought that, you know, the idea, well, if people have got the money and go private, it takes the strain off the NHS. But it doesn't, because it's the same blooming doctors who are saying, well, I can't work in the NHS today, I've got a private patient.
But there'll be loads of people listening and watching this who have had a situation where they've had to have surgery, elective surgery, and they've been offered a series of private health providers to go and have their operations at a private hospital. That increases competition in the market and it speeds up the process with which you can have knees replaced, hips replaced. In my husband's case, he had some cartilage removed from his knee. It was a really straightforward process. Now, that is effectively a degree of part privatisation. If you spoke to some people on the left, that's anathema to them. They don't want to hear about that. But if it makes the system more efficient...
Yeah, but doesn't it cost us more? Doesn't it cost...
No, because if you've got private providers competing to give us knee, hip and other replacements, then it actually drives the cost down, because you've got the likes of Spire and Bupa and other private providers all wanting that business.
Well, so long as it does not costing the government any more money, then that's fine, because it all boils down to money.
But there's this ideological kind of... opposition, isn't there? The left don't want any notion at all. You talk about charging for GP appointments. No, you talk about fining people for missed appointments, which I think would be quite popular with the country. They don't want anything to do with that. So speaking about that, Ukraine and this NATO summit next week in Lithuania is obviously big news, with Joe Biden due to arrive in the UK later.
And the cluster bombs
I've got
scenario.
the former deputy Chief of the General Staff, General Defence Staff, Simon Mail, to come in to talk to us about what's going on in Ukraine. Funnily enough, IDS has just been in Ukraine, so he can tell me about what he's seeing out there. He's been to Bucha and other areas with his charity that helps to provide food and aid to people who are affected by the war. So a jam-packed show as ever, guys.
Can I just throw at you?
Yes.
I know the whole IDS thing about why would you want to be in opposition. Isn't opposition the only place where parties can reset and come back fresh?
But what's interesting about where the Conservatives might find themselves, let's assume that the election is autumn 2024, it depends who's left. I mean, IDS himself, who's a very key figure on the right, has got a really marginal majority. London Tories face wipeout, although, to be fair, are just clinging on in because of ULEZ being so deeply unpopular that might reflect at the ballot box nationally. But if the Tories do face electoral wipeout come 2024, the question for them is who is left? Are righties left or are lefties left in the parties? Because if all of the righties are wiped out, and I think there are some key seats that they're obviously focusing on with regard to selections, because they have had a habit in the past, the Tories, of basically electing sort of closet Liberal Democrats to some of their seats. People like Sarah Williston, Heidi Allen, who actually did end up defecting. There'll be a push from the right to make sure that what's left of the party is right-leaning and not too centrist. And then, of course, you'll have the One Nationers hoping that it's their more moderate candidates that make the cut. So the future of conservatism as we know it is
that's
hanging
the
in
big
the
debate
balance
amongst Conservatives.
Exactly.
Oh, fascinating stuff. Camilla, thank you very much indeed. See you at 9:30. Now, talking of Tories, or former Tories at least, a protester tried to disrupt the wedding of the former Chancellor, George Osborne, by throwing orange confetti at the couple when they left the church.
Yes, it was a female protester, and she sort of ran away quickly, smiling, though, very pleased with herself, after being approached by security. And Just Stop Oil have retweeted a video of the incident, actually congratulating the newlyweds.
Well, earlier we spoke to writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth.
I really disagreed with it. I just think that there are certain boundaries, and one of them is someone's wedding. You don't disrupt that. But I think Just Stop Oil don't cleave to those sorts of social norms. They do what they want to do when they want to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been criticised so much. I mean, if social media is anything to go by, across the political spectrum last night, people said, no, you don't disrupt someone's wedding. That's wrong. It doesn't matter what your political point is. But then when they were throwing paint at Van Gogh paintings, they didn't care then. And they said, you know, well, the climate emergency justifies it. But this is just such attention seeking. And I think what it's doing, though, is it's turning people off their cause, and it's making them really disagree with the tactics that they're using to try to get their point across. I mean, even their billionaire backers have said that they don't agree with it anymore. The whole thing has just gotten out of control.
Yeah, but look, I think the vast majority of people would agree and say, no, you shouldn't disrupt anyone's wedding. She didn't disrupt their wedding, did she? As they came out the church door, she walked up behind them and threw some... Confetti over them. It's not... I mean, they weren't disrupted. The whole thing lasted a couple of seconds and they smiled and carried on.
Well, I think that was more a smile of confusion. I mean, that's what I saw. They looked confused. I mean, Thea, she looked behind twice. What are you doing? I mean, that's supposed to be the moment for the bride and groom when they walk out of the church together to all their guests, and instead they had a stranger who they don't know just run up and start emptying confetti on them. And I thought that when she emptied the confetti at the last, before she was told to go away, that looked quite aggressive to me. I mean, she's not a friend of theirs.
No, that's what I think. You're a bride and you're coming out of the church, and it should be, you know, probably one of the happiest days of your life. And you don't know what's going to happen next when somebody comes up with a box of confetti.
No, and they're both quite well known as well. So, I mean, you have no idea if it's someone who is trying to be malicious towards you. Then they had that whole incident with the poison pen email. So, I mean, they might already be feeling a bit tense. I just, you know, I think that Just Stop Oil is creating a very sour atmosphere politically. I mean, one thing that one person said, and I really agree with them on this, is, you know, one of the benefits of public life here is a lot of famous people don't have to walk around with security. But if things like this happen, then they might do that, because they might be like, well, I just can't trust ordinary people to treat me with respect.
Well, I have to say, most of you, the vast majority of you, thinking it was, as Ruth says, a disgusting and disgraceful way to behave. Oh, if that had been my wedding and I was that bride, I'm sorry to say I would have turned round and thumped her.
Yeah, and then you'd have been done for grievous bodily harm.
Yes, you would have done.
It wouldn't have ended well at all, would it?
No. Just a quick one. Dean, hello from sunny Malta. He's going for a swim. Diane's in Melbourne, Australia. It's 5 p.m, raining and bitterly cold. And Anne's in hospital. Just recovering from surgery.
Oh, look, our best wishes to all of you. It's lovely that you got in touch. Thank you.
You're probably not doing any DIY, Anne, in hospital.
No, but the rest of you probably are. Sunday's a day for DIY.
It is.
Especially since the weather's not going to be that.
Maybe you'll end up in hospital afterwards, where Rubbish Edit apparently will tell you why in just a moment. Let's talk DIY, should we? Because we're rubbish at it.
Apparently 65% of us are absolutely useless at DIY. And yet I always believed it was something that we Brits did really well.
Well, we think we do really well. Let's talk to DIY expert Joe Bahari. Good morning to you, Joe. Why is it that we think we can do it, but we just can't?
Well, I don't think we're ever actually taught how to do it. So unless somebody shows you, you've got somebody in your family that's willing to show you, or you've got somebody that works in the trades, there's no other opportunity to learn. And we are a nation of longer term renters now. So often people rely on a landlord having to do things for them before they move into their own property. And then they've got no clue because they haven't had the opportunity to do it for themselves.
Isn't it true, though, that if you want to do something well, you've got to have the right equipment? And nowadays, DIY stuff is very expensive, isn't it?
Yes, it can be. And I think a lot of people move into a property or decide that they're going to attempt a DIY project and get all gung-ho and buy loads of really expensive tools. The thing is, when you're buying tools, you need a basic set that is a mid-range price. It's really important not to buy the cheapest, because the cheapest tools are made of poorer materials and they're not going to be very ergonomic, and therefore they're going to cause failure when it comes to doing the job, which makes you think you're not very good at DIY, but actually it could be the tool that's the problem. However, we're really, really lucky these days in that we can hire or borrow tools from tool stations or even tool libraries. There's plenty of tool libraries popping up around the country that allow you to borrow a drill for the weekend or a saw or something like that. So you don't actually have to go and make that investment before you go into the DIY project that you want to do.
I'll tell you what worries me, the people in our gallery, and there's 4 or 5 of them in there.
Oh, you mean the TV gallery?
The TV gallery here. Only 1 out of them knows how to wire a plug. Now, I have to say, I was taught how to do that when I was about 7 or 8. So what... I mean, that's terrible, isn't it?
Well, I think I'm from a generation where I was taught how to do that kind of simple stuff as well. But actually, when do you need to do that skill? How often have you needed to wire a plug in the last 10, 15, 20 years? So there's a whole generation of people that don't actually need to wire a plug because everything comes with a moulded plug on it these days. And it's, you know, difficult to get access to that, and there's no actual reason for you to change the plug. So I think there's a necessity issue there. No one knows how to do it because no one needs to do it anymore.
It's a fair point.
What's the single best gadget?
I think, do you know what? The single best gadget is an electric screwdriver, because a lot of people do know how to build flat pack, or will come across building flat pack, and the little hex keys that they give you in a flat pack kit are rubbish. Yeah. So if you can get an electric screwdriver with a set of hex keys on it, then you can power your flat pack and make it much easier for you to build.
Brilliant.
See, that's the key thing to know.
Right.
Joe, really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. That is it from us. We'll see you on Friday. Camilla Tominey's up next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We've got heavy showers in the forecast once again today, but there will be plenty of sunny spells too, still feeling quite warm and humid. And low pressure sits to the west of us at the moment, bringing in those showers across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery at times. And as we move through the next few days, that low pressure just starts to move over us, so increasing the risk of those heavy showers even more. This morning, plenty of sunshine from the word go, though we do have some patchy rain across southeast England, a few heavier bursts possible here, and also rain clearing the far north of Scotland. But it is the showers we're going to watch as we move through the day. They'll turn particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland, across into Wales, the Midlands, southwest England. Some rumbles of thunder, hail, gusty winds possible too. In between, though, plenty of sunny spells, and that'll lift temperatures towards the mid-20s. As we move through the evening time, we'll continue to see showers push north across the UK, some of them heavy and thundery. We could see some local travel disruption, but they should fade away as we end the day. And then most places dry overnight with clear spells, perhaps a few shallow mist and fog patches forming by the end of the night. A little fresher tonight, temperatures generally 12 to 15 Celsius in most towns and cities, a little lower in the countryside, but it means plenty of sunshine for Monday morning, just some cloud and patchy rain across the far north of Scotland. And then as that low pressure edges near us, we will see outbreaks of rain starting to move in, affecting parts of Northern Ireland, West Wales, the West Country, up into western Scotland too. Some showers here. Best of the sunshine across eastern and southeast England. Here temperatures reaching again close to the mid-20s. A little bit fresher as the breeze picks up further west and that rain moves in. It stays unsettled as that low pressure moves in over the coming days. Further heavy showers across the UK and temperatures start